I have always been here.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and another Ambassadorial Editorial. And tonight we are going to be doing a breakdown of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Trilogy. And for those of you who were here last night, you know this guy to my left, your right. You know him, you love him. He's wacky. He's a little kooky. Mr. Zach O'Leary. Zach, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on board. And thank you again for being here tonight. I appreciate it. So, and to everybody that's tuning in this evening, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you comment in the chat and let me know what you all think. And of course, as always, the link for the stream is in the chat. So be sure to, if you want to join the stream, use it. So, but I actually found out something kind of interesting from this fella over here earlier today. Today is actually the 13th anniversary of the theatrical release of The Dark Knight. So, and Zach, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. So, and
well, I know this is not the case, but it was almost as if you had planned it.
I honestly, it didn't even cross my mind. I don't often do like research on that sort of thing. So when you mentioned it on Twitter, I was like, is that really true? And I looked it up. I was like, well,
what a crazy coincidence.
I'll be a son of a gun. I was like, I wasn't even aware because it's, you like I say, you don't really keep track of dates like that. So, but to the chat, my good friend, Jason P. Press in Polyhedral Paradise. Jason, good to see you, bud. Hope you're having a good Sunday evening. Weekend's almost over, unfortunately, but we are here, we are back, and we are doing another one of these editorials. And like I said, we're going to be doing the full breakdown of the Dark Knight trilogy: Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and Dark Knight Rises. So we don't stand on a bunch of ceremony here. We're going to jump right into the topic of the evening, and we will kick this off with, of course, Batman Begins. So, Zach, I'm going to open the floor and let you have the first word. So, have at it, my man.
Well, I'm just going to start out by complimenting Christopher Nolan, who I think is maybe one of the best filmmakers, if not the best, to come after the generation of Lucas and Spielberg and those other guys and De Palma. He may be one of the best that we've had since then, along with Tarantino and a couple other people. But he's just so impressive. I mean, the way he structures a film is very interesting to me. If you go back and look at Memento and Insomnia, and I think the other film was The Following, but if you go back and check out his earlier work, there's something about Nolan's eye for storytelling and story structure. There's something somewhat magical about the first film in this series, where it's almost got a fantasy fairy tale element to it, with Bruce going off into the mountains and training with these mystic, ninja warrior guys. It's a lot of fun, and you've got the Scarecrow, who is a great deal of fun as well. And great cast, great storyline, and I think the execution was on point.
Yes, I would absolutely agree. And well, we got another fella here who is just as much of a diehard Batman fan as any I've met. Dennis Medina. Dennis, good evening, sir. How you doing?
Good evening. Here's night, but all right. It's night down here, but all right. Good evening. Well, I was hearing you guys saying about the Dark Knight trilogy, and
yes,
like the topic of today, of course. And I like, yeah, the Dark Knight Trilogy was like one of the first movies I ever watched. It. I remember when I was like very, very, very child, like I was like 9, 6. I remember not actually liking the Dark Knight Trilogy. Then I started growing up and started loving it. Each time I watch it more, I start loving it more. You know, it's very interesting. Batman Begins was actually the exception. It was the one that I liked the most when I was a kid. Nowadays, the Dark Knight, but when I was a kid, I love Batman Begins. Like I worship that movie because it was I think the second Batman movie I watched. It. The second one. The first I think was Batman Forever. So Batman Forever. Then I watched Begins, and then now I'm a hard Batman fan. I always was actually, but far back as I can remember, I was a Batman fan. Like
right. Well, speaking for myself, I saw all 3 of these in theater. I mean, the only other theatrical experience I had watching a Batman film was, well, I did see Forever, and I did see part of Batman and Robin. That was actually one of the only a few movies I've ever walked out on, or well, in this case, drove out on, because I was at a drive-in when I saw it. But when I went to see Batman Begins, I was like, this is a more serious take. This is dealing with this particular character in a much more mature and a much more grounded manner. And honestly, I appreciated that fact. I mean, as you said, Zach, Christopher Nolan is one of the higher echelon directors in the entertainment industry currently. And I know some people have some issues with his films. I mean, with his most recent outing of Tenet. Personally, I loved Tenet. I really enjoyed it. I did get a chance to see it. I did get a chance to see it in theaters back last year. But in terms of what he's done, what he did with the Dark Knight trilogy, is he introduced a character in terms of Bruce Wayne or Batman that's feasible. And even more feasible than we've seen him previously. And I have to admit, I know that are some people that have an issue with Christian Bale in his voice, attitude, his attitude on set and so on. But when you set that aside and you look at him just for his ability as an actor, his performance as Bruce Wayne and Batman was right on point. I think this is one of the few times where we see Bruce Wayne in a much more vulnerable and a much more realistic portrayal. So, but Zach, Dennis, your thoughts on that?
One thing I think people forget about Dark Knight Trilogy, one thing I love about the trilogy, is that it is at core an Elseworld story. Like an Elseworld in the sense that they grab the basic characters and reimagine them. Like instead of being let's adapt Batman for a work of fiction, is more like a question, like if Batman existed in the real world, how would it be? If the DC mythos were a real thing, where would they exist? How they would behave? How they would act? You know, and I think that's the brilliance of it. You know, because it wasn't a phase where superhero movies are starting to get popular, but they're not starting to get serious because we still had great superhero movies. Don't get me wrong. The Raimi trilogy was my childhood, but Spider-Man 2 was my childhood, but like when we really start thinking about, with the exception of X-Men, and even then there were some campy elements over that movie. I don't remember it well, so I can't open it completely. They were very comedic, you know. They didn't take themselves 100% seriously. And what the Dark Knight trilogy did was create an Elseworld story, so the superhero stories could be serious, could be mainstream, could be artistic. And that's something what I really enjoy about Dark Knight trilogy. They said this doesn't have to be for kids. Doesn't have to be something that is let's laugh at the superhero. You get, let's laugh at the how campy it is. We don't need that. It can be something greater, something grandiose, something bigger in scope, in, you know. And of course, Burton and Raimi and Singer and like Donner, rest in peace. They all had this to a certain point, but Nolan was the first one to actually go full on this, go 100% on the idea of a serious superhero movie. So,
well, I would say that Batman Begins is really the birth of a new man. I mean, the Bruce Wayne that we meet at the beginning doesn't exist by the end of the film. Yeah. So it's a transformation piece, which is very interesting. It's a character study of a guy who sees something wrong and tries to single-handedly take a stand.
Yes. That for me is one of the truly intriguing things about this particular portrayal of Batman and Bruce Wayne, is the fact that you have Bruce saying to his surrogate father, I see what's wrong in Gotham, and I understand what my mother and my father tried to do. When Alfred tells him, your father nearly bankrupted Wayne Enterprises trying to combat poverty in Gotham, Bruce takes that very much to heart and says, well, my father went to almost an extreme. I should probably do the same thing. And what I really appreciated about Bale's performance is it wasn't played hammy or cheesy. Granted, the tone and the tenor of this particular Batman and this series of movies is very, very heavy. It does have certain superhero elements within it, per se. I would say a little bit of the structure is very reminiscent of a superhero movie or a comic book movie, but they try to delve into the psyche of not only Batman, of Bruce Wayne, but also of his villains. I mean, this is the first time we really get, except for maybe the 90s animated series, we get a deep dive into the villain's mind of Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul and Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow. And I know this is a point that has been made many times, and I will bring it up here. I like the fact that Nolan used less recognizable villains for his films. I mean, obviously you have the Scarecrow and you have Ra's al Ghul. Granted, you do have Two-Face and Joker, especially Joker, placed very prominently within the Dark Knight. But then in Dark Knight Rises, you have Talia al Ghul and you have Bane. These are not, now while Batman's Rogues Gallery is pretty well known, these particular characters you wouldn't list right off the bat if you were going through like a list of like his top 10 rogues or his top 10 villains. So, and I do want to say to the chat, CJ, good to see you this evening. I'll bring up CJ's comment and then we'll go from there. I think that DC is more likely to have a standalone serious movie. With Marvel, unless it's from Sony, it's probably won't be standalone or serious. Okay. And then Daniel Martin says, I did like Nolan's approach to the Batman mythos and making him more grounded in the real world. I remember A&E did a few shows on the science of the Dark Knight, how these gadgets and vehicles could be made. I wasn't aware of that, Daniel, so thank you for pointing that out. I'll see if I can look it up after we're done here this evening. And then Marvel has fallen into the trap of having to connect it to the MCU, and it can't be standalone. It has to set up the next film or show. DC can just make whatever they want. Well, I understand what you're saying, CJ, but here's the big difference with what Marvel and what DC are doing. Marvel got there first in terms of the connected universe. DC is essentially just doing standalone. They tried to do a connected universe, but it was bungled, unfortunately. But in terms of what the Dark Knight trilogy is, it does really stand out and shine as how a serious and heavy superhero movie, or just a serious and heavy psychological drama, can be done right. That's how I would kind of categorize the Dark Knight trilogy. It's like a psychological drama, but it just happens to deal with a very well-known superhero in his rogues gallery, and that is, of course, Bruce Wayne and Batman. So, Zach or Dennis, your thoughts on that?
First, about the rogues, I think is really great. I think it's interesting because I believe that Christopher Nolan is not that big of a fan of comic books, but I can tell he did his research in the movies. I mean, sure, it's not perfect. Like Falcone was basically the Godfather in the comics, but in the movie he's more like a generic mobster. But it's alright. But I like the fact they use some villains more less known. Like Falcone's successor in Dark Knight is Maroni, who is a minor character in the comics, like very minor character in the comics. They still use him because they think it will be a nice little hint to the audience, Other one, another one I like is Zaz. He was the one who
Victor
gave
Zaz.
The Gotham later would use of Zaz being a mobster, being a hitman for the mob. What else? Let me think. Oh, the identity, real identity of Ra's al Ghul in this universe, the current Ra's al Ghul, because it implies is a legacy title.
Right.
When he's first meet, and he's Henri Ducar, who is an actual character in the Batman mythos, who is a low-petty criminal that actually helped Bruce when he was a mercenary that is friends with Bruce Wayne and Batman, Henri Ducar, he's a European mercenary in the comics, or something like that. I'm not fully aware of that part, but Henri Ducar is a character in the comics, so that's interesting. I think but then I was a Batman fan, so maybe it's just me. But for example, the Scarecrow, I think I knew who he was. I definitely think Begins had some very minor villains at the start. I think by the point that the Dark Knight Rises arrives, I think that Rise is not that less known, but they definitely give a good spin on the characters. Like Talia, nobody knows in the mainstream audiences, but Bane, many people know, but they focus in the psychological aspect of Bane as an opponent instead of the
the brute fighter. Yeah,
which everyone was focusing back then. People have forgotten he was supposed to be a reverse Batman, not only in strength but in mind. He's basically evil Batman Bane, and I think that's nice. Oh, what you said, making reverse Batman, that's Bane. Remember, we were saying earlier that there is no reverse Batman. The last discussion.
Oh, over on Neil's stream, yeah. Well, Zach, did you have any comments you wanted to make, sir?
Thanks. I had comment about the concept of Bruce buying a gun and trying to confront Falcone on his own.
Oh, that too. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, he at first he has that he has the realization that he has to act, and he tries to act as Bruce Wayne and discovers it's not gonna work. That's another important part of why he does what he does. Is and plus you have the relationship with Rachel, and she's concerned about him. I think he shows her the gun at one point, but he goes in, he tries to confront Falcone, and it's a total disaster. So he realizes, I can't do this as one guy, but I can do it as an idea. right? That's part of his realization. I think there's some line of dialogue to that effect that, yes, as an idea, as a symbol, I can change things as one man.
Yeah, it's when he's come back from his self-imposed exile, if you want to call it that, and Alfred picks him up there at that airfield in the private jet. He's like, as I need to pick something elemental, something fierce, something
Yes.
frightening. And that's when he has that momentary flashback to when he was a young boy down in the cave below the greenhouse there on the Wayne Manor grounds, and he sees the bats, and he has that revelation, the bat. And when Alfred asks him, "Why bats?" Bats
scare
frighten
me.
Bats scare me. It's time my opponents share my dread. And
it's a great line.
And that's one of the. This series of films had some very solid writing, really, really solid writing. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough. I mean, this has some of the best dialogue. Not to mention, not only did the dialogue drive the story, but it does have some good quotes in it. It has some quotable lines, and especially, obviously, from The Dark Knight. Let's put a smile on that face.
Well, here's a favorite of mine from Batman Begins, and it's a very philosophical one. When Thomas Wayne rappels down to fetch Bruce, he says, "Why do we fall?" Right? That's very philosophical.
Yes, I would agree. I would absolutely agree. I'll comment on Daniel. I'll bring up CJ and Daniel's comments here. DC can make films like the Dark Knight trilogy that you can watch one after the other and just understand the whole trilogy. Yeah, that's true. And then Daniel, there was a through line throughout the trilogy. Batman is a symbol. Yep,
a symbol of fear for some, hope for others. Depend.
Yeah. And let's see, if you devote yourself to an ideal, and if you become more than just a man, you can become something else entirely, which is a legend. A legend, Mr. Wayne.
Can you do the Alfred voice? For that.
Well, that wasn't Alfred who said that. That was actually Ra's al Ghul who said that to Bruce.
Oh, is that who said it? Okay.
Yes, that was actually that was early on. I think that was actually when Bruce was in that I think it was a Chinese or a North Korean prison. I think it was a Chinese prison.
From Rises.
One of the
it was from Batman Begins.
Oh, was
it? One of the first things.
Yeah, Ra's al Ghul says that. Ra's al Ghul says that to him in the prison in Batman Begins.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah. I remember the introduction for Bruce Wayne in the first movie. I still remember that scene. I remember that were like he was fighting the goons. The goons ambush him, and they fight, and then comes the guards. You are taking protective custody, and then he says, "I don't need protection," and then they say,
"They're like
protection." Then and so the criminals are beaten up, like half broken, like because he beat all those tough criminals up, show that he's already a good fighter.
Yeah, he has trained himself to be a fighter. But he goes through further training there with the League of Shadows. Yeah, and I have to admit, the whole training montage, it's almost like your atypical training montage in a superhero movie, but at the same time it isn't, because it has a lot of very interesting dialogue within it, and a lot of really and one piece in particular when they bring in that random farmer. And he's hanging in the middle of he's hanging above in midair in that cage. And towards the end of his time there, before he destroys the monastery, wherever you want to call it, where the headquarters where the League of Shadows is based, he's like, this man should be tried and punished for his crimes. He's like, I will not become an executioner. And that's where the ideological difference between Bruce and Roz deviates. And you see a similar deviation in the 90s animated series where Bruce has a certain respect for Ra's al Ghul, but he doesn't believe in his methods per se. And I like the fact that Nolan carried that particular dynamic over from the animated series into the films, or particularly the first film.
The comics as well, because the animated series was
okay.
to Neil Adams, then your Neil Run, and there was Ra's al Ghul emerged, the James Bond villain, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
well,
one thing I find interesting. Sorry, but first, I'm gonna give a criticism now. I try not to be critical, but I think that seems sort of broken because then he sets the whole temple on fire and obviously kills a couple of guys there. So like, there is kind of some broken Aesop on the thing, you know. A broken, like, it's supposed to give the lesson that he has stopped killing, but they will not kill, but then he blows up the temple, you know. So I think there's some kind of hypocrisy there. But I don't, you know, I think it was like they didn't take this into consideration. Like it was like what can I say? Plot hole. It's a plot hole. I don't know a better term. You know, but no big problem. You can look besides it.
Well,
but I want to acknowledge now is that I heard somewhere.
To respond to Dennis, I think that was self-defense, wasn't it? Right? They would not allow him. I think, right? They
wouldn't.
Right. So you know, they kind of gave him an ultimatum. Is that what happened?
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
That's
what happened? Yeah. Essentially, Bruce acts out of self-defense. I don't think he intends to actually. I don't think he intended to actually kill anyone, but it kind of goes back. It's mirrored at the end of the movie where he says, "I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you." But
I like the idea too that Roz had a double. You know, he had a figurehead Roz. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ken Watanabe, who's brilliant, did another Nolan film, Inception. Great guy.
Yes, I remember him. I remember him very prominently in Inception. Yes,
that was Ken Watanabe. I didn't recognize him. I swear.
Yeah, I think his other big movie is Godzilla.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in Godzilla. I remember. I watched the 2014 movie like 300 times already when I was a child. I loved that movie.
Mm-hmm. I do want to bring up Daniel's comment here. For the first time in live action, we got to see Bruce train with the League of Shadows. They always talk about Bruce training in martial arts. Actually, good to actually see it. Yeah, I have to agree, Daniel. Not to mention, it not only is it nice to see him training where it fulfills that story rule or that narrative rule, show don't tell. But you also have some really good character moments, and you have some good dialogue within that whole section of the film. I mean, we've seen like in the animated series, like in particular in certain episodes, and also in the Mask of the Phantasm film, we see Bruce go and train in all these different disciplines in martial arts to be an escape artist. And all those.
He's wearing the suit and the belt. The suit and the belt, the Taekwondo belt and everything. This is more badass, though. There's no doubt about that than Bruce training in a Taekwondo gym. This is way cooler.
I'm gonna go with a suggestion for next guy who tries to make a Batman movie. I remember, just a curiosity.
Hey, Angus.
It's a fun fact. I read a fan fiction once. It's like Justice League in World War II, like post-World War II, like in the 40s, post-war era, like a version like that, you know, of superheroes, DC Comics in the post-war era. And they reimagined Batman for him to, instead of going into ninja training, he goes into the OSS. Yeah, I thought that was a good idea, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In working in war, going to a war and training there, like learning the methods and then trying to translate that methods to a known little version of those methods in Gotham, you know. Like, being a spy or something. I think that would be a great idea for the next guy who tries to make a Batman story.
Hey, Tim, good to see you. And just a quick shout to the chat, Black Angus Reviews and Tim Possible. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to see you both. And Black Angus, that's awesome. I haven't watched them in a while, but I remember them very vividly. I mean, we'll get to Dark Knight Rises in due course. We're currently working on Batman Begins. As I said at the start, we're going to be doing a full breakdown of all three films. So this will take a little bit. So if any of you fellas are wanting to join me and the guy, join me and Zach and Dennis, wings up yonder. So,
well, I wanted to bring this up, if you don't mind. The action scenes were very interesting. I mean, they were shot from the perspective of the criminals, which is not something you see too often, and it kind of ups the fear factor, and kind of explains why word would get out among these lower level thugs, like, yeah, you better not fuck around at night. You know, you got the Batman out there.
Yeah, I actually prefer the action scenes in this movie that they shot by the criminal's point of view, because when further movies come close, we know that the action scenes in the sequels, like, they are not that great. I'm gonna say that. I don't like a lot of the action sequences, especially the Dark Knight. I don't remember Rises, but maybe because the Dark Knight is so perfect that the action scenes stop short of being a masterpiece thanks to the action. They sort of boring. Okay. So it stops short of being perfect because of the action. So I guess
that's funny. I mean, that's very interesting. I showed the film to my grandfather one day, and he had never seen it, but he was a big fan. He grew up on the Adam West and everything like that, and he's an old school guy. He's always liked Batman, though, and him and I would watch most of them. We saw the Nicholson one and the Batman Returns, but when he saw the Dark Knight, he said the same thing that Dennis is saying, that I think he was talking about the scene in the hotel where Joker breaks in and they have that first fight with the cam going everywhere. He didn't like that, and he told me that.
Yeah, I think that the scene where he disarms the goons on that fight, I think that's the only moment in the show I can't just think that's great. Like, that stops the movie from being perfect at that moment, because I mean, I was spoiled. I'm a big fan of BVS, so I was kind of spoiled because that movie has amazing action sequences. But so that might be that, because the warehouse fight. So I can't just,
he's a Western guy too. I think when he was a kid, I think the first movie he told me he saw was Wizard of Oz. Was the first movie he saw in the theater. So, but he was a Western guy, and you'd go to see him, and he'd be watching Westerns on TV, black and white Westerns and the Clint Eastwood ones. It just was too quick for him. You think of think of the God, what is the name of that movie? The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly shootout at the end. Yeah, you think of that shootout, and you look at the action scenes. I can kind of get where he's coming from. He's used to the slow burn, sort of dramatic Hitchcock, But yeah, I like the fight scenes in all these films. To be honest with you, I dig it.
Yes, honestly, I think the fight choreography for these three films was much more grounded, was a lot more realistic, and I think the way that sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
No, I would disagree. Like, I feel like doesn't seem the stage for me. The way I see it, it looks very staged. Like, I can't see that happening like in real context, but maybe that's just my impression. I think the action could be better. I don't think it ruins the movie. Far from it. I think the movie is great in most things, and especially when the action is actually not being shown into your face. When they are like in the Mook horror story. The Mook horror story, like they're showing by the point of view of the criminals. It's great because then they can get away with the more clunky aspects of the bat suit.
I totally agree.
That scene where he captures Falcone in the docks, remember? Where he captures the mob in the docks. That scene is just Batman. That scene is just Batman, and I love that.
Honestly, I did. Honestly, for me, the action scenes I think were fine. I think they were, like I said, I think they were crafted well. I think that they really go to show how the Batman would fight in the real world. He would use mixed martial arts. He would use grappling and all these other different disciplines. So, just speaking for myself, I have to say the fight choreography didn't bother me, but I have to say that sequence in Batman Begins where he is at the docks and he's trying to and he's plucking out Falcone's men one at a time. That is absolutely really, that for me is a quintessentially perfect Batman action scene, because he's trained as a ninja, he has trained in martial arts and all of these other things, and he's using the entire tool bag at his disposal to take down these guys. I mean, because you have to remember, it's one guy against a bunch of other guys. And granted, he's got that suit that's basically bulletproof, but it doesn't make him indestructible by any stretch. And I do want to address the chat with Daniel Martin here. Nolan's shortcomings as a director is the fight choreography, close in shots as opposed to wide shots, and sometimes very exposition heavy. Tenet very much so. And I'll bring up Unknown or Zach's comments here. I thought Tenet sucked, to be honest. Well, hey, it's not everybody's cup of tea. But I did.
Did you see it?
I guess this my comment. I did see it and I did enjoy it. But
okay. Well, I like the performances. You know, that kid is Denzel's son, the main guy. John David Washington.
John David Washington?
Yeah, that's Denzel Washington's son.
Well, he's really
good. It didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Wow.
He's great in that movie.
I may have to see it again, to be honest with you, man. I saw it one time in the theater and left not knowing what the fuck hit me.
That's honestly, that is a comment that a lot of people have made, and I've heard people say that they've gone back and watched it, and after watching it a second time, they understood it.
Yeah, I guess that's a thing they make, but personally, I'm very fan of spoilers. I read spoilers all the time, so I knew exactly what was going to happen in the movie. So
it's a weird movie, but he makes a lot of them.
If you look at Memento, that's definitely an odd movie.
Yeah.
Create a hook right here. Create a hook right here.
Don't answer the phone.
What I love about Nolan is that impressive about Nolan that he doesn't use CGI. Like, I don't have problems with CGI.
Very rarely.
I actually like CGI. I think there's great CGI, Man of Steel, the Snyderverse in general, but I think there's an impressive thing to be had with when he removes the CGI. You know, for example, the plane scene. Or remember the plane scene that they grab the plane, crash the plane. You know, remember the Dark Knight Rises. Actually, right. They actually made the Gotham City from Begins. That was actually wanted to talk about that the Gotham, how they portray Gotham. That movie is great, and they did that in miniatures. They created a map of Gotham and create miniatures all over the place so they could portray this.
Must have seen the behind the scenes documentaries. Ambassador, you should check them out. They're on YouTube for free. They are tremendous.
I actually have the entire. I have the entire Dark Knight. I have the entire Dark Knight trilogy on Blu-ray. So I imagine it's in the special features. So I can just check it out there. Yeah, I would. It's been the. I will say I did like the design aesthetic for Gotham. I know that they did use, well, as you fellas mentioned, they used miniatures, but what they did with Dark Knight Rises is they used actual cities. I think they used Chicago. I could be wrong, or they use I I almost want to say that they did use
No, you're
Chicago or
correct.
part of Chicago.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Chicago
And
in begins in night. I think rises they had New York because I remember there was that scandal and among quotation marks, but that they end up showing actual real life building on New York in the end of the one trade center in New York.
And
The
they
one
also did a little bit in London.
accidentally in a
oh,
shot.
did
They
they?
did some in
Yeah.
London too.
Okay. Well, you know, the thing that I appreciate most about Batman Begins is you really get the stronger sense of the relationship between Bruce and Alfred. And I mentioned this the other day as well on your video, Zach. This is one of only a few times where we actually got more than just Thomas and Martha Wayne being shot in an alley. We actually got time with Bruce's parents.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
I absolutely love the portrayals, particularly by the actor. I think his name is Lance Roach, who played Thomas Wayne, and his portrayal of Thomas Wayne, I think, was very authentic. It was very real, and it really gave you this impression that these were loving parents, that Bruce had a solid family bond with his parents. And when you see them gunned down by Joe Chill, and even that scene, I know there have been a lot of different portrayals of the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne, but honestly, I have to say it, this is by far one of my favorites, because this isn't an evil guy. This is a guy that was driven to desperation. And you see the actor who plays Joe Chill in that courtroom scene, and he says, I can't take back what I did. He's like, if I could, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. He's like, if I could change it, I would, but he's like, I can't. And he's like, I just want to try and make the rest of my life mean something. And I honestly found that particular concept of who kills Thomas and Martha Wayne to be very intriguing and, again, rooted in reality. That was something that I appreciated deeply. So, Dennis, Zach, your thoughts?
I never liked the idea of the Joker killing Bruce's parents. I never really was a fan of that. It works for that film, but you know, I would agree. I think it was done very well in this. I think my favorite one, and this may not surprise you, it was in The Dark Knight Returns. But yeah, I mean, you know, you have Bruce. I think here's another important element: is you have Bruce and Alfred's relationship really thoroughly set up in the first film. I mean, you have Alfred saves Bruce at some point in the film. I think it's towards the end, right when there's the fire in Wayne Manor.
Yes.
Alfred comes and rescues him. So, I mean, Alfred is a guy who saved Bruce's life, you know, and that's establishing big payoffs throughout the series. I mean, you have such a great payoff between the two of them. And I want to just make this point before I forget about Dark Knight Rises, but bouncing off my point about Begins. When Alfred is standing there at the grave of Bruce, Thomas, and Martha, he says, I have failed you. But he's not talking to Bruce. He's talking to his parents, who he made a vow to keep this kid safe, and fails in his eyes at that time.
Yeah, I got you.
But what a beautiful relationship, between the two of them. I mean, what a great partnership throughout the series. I mean, Alfred is so integral to these films, and he's got a great setup in the first one, and man, does it pay off later.
Another thing I'm gonna compliment this movie for doing. Another fun fact. I think I know why the first movie had Ra's al Ghul was a bad guy. I think I know. I'm not certain, but I heard that Nolan is apparently a James Bond fan. So I think the fact he chose Ra's al Ghul is actually because Ra's al Ghul started as the idea of creating a Bond villain in the DC universe. And remember, I don't think you know that he was originally supposed to be a Bond villain, like in the universe. So I think that's interesting that they used, and also that Lucius Fox is apparently based on Q in this version of Lucius. Also, he actually had my second favorite version of Commissioner Gordon, which is appreciated. I like that Gary Oldman. Like every time I think Commissioner Gordon, I think or Gary Oldman or the guy from Gotham, Dan McKenzie, because of personality, not the appearance, you know.
Well,
So
we
Gary
can talk about that character if you guys want to. The Gary Oldman's.
Yes, please.
Gordon.
Let's dig into Jim Gordon and Batman Begins. Yeah,
no,
absolutely.
It's incredible because before that there was no live action Jim Gordon. I'm sorry, I love the Burton movies, but that was not Jim Gordon.
He sucked. Yeah, he sucked in the Burton movies. He was terrible. I like that actor a lot. That guy's a great actor.
Yeah,
I forget his name.
I do like that actor, but I have to agree. That was a very incompetent, very, very incompetent commissioner. I mean, in this version, we see his rise from a beat cop
to commissioner
to the commissioner of the Gotham Police Department. Yeah, I have to agree. Gary Oldman has long been one of my favorite actors, just in general. But him as Jim Gordon in this film, he was right on point. I have to admit, and I don't think anybody will butt heads with me on this. His reaction when he's in the Batmobile or in the Tumbler, and he uses that cannon to blow out the supports of the railway. He's like, yes, and I'm like, he's like, and when he's driving the Tumbler, he's like, he sees Batman take off in the Tumbler. He's like, I've definitely got to get me one of those.
Yeah,
I have to.
I love how he's just a normal guy, like not normal guy, a badass, but like he reacts like anyone, any of us would to that shit. Like what anyone would. Gordon had this tradition of being the only sane man in Batman stories.
Yeah, Zach, go ahead, bud. Okay, you must step away for a second. Yeah, honestly, Gary Oldman has had a very long and very distinguished career. I don't think he's ever really done a bad movie per se.
I don't think
so.
But
in his role as Jim Gordon and is just, particularly in Batman Begins, he's the one honest man in a dishonest city. At least that's how he feels. And he is he's trying to get by. He's trying to take care of his family. He's trying to take care of his wife and his son. The son was alive at that and Begins. He was older and in Dark Knight. That's right. And I cannot speak more highly of Gary Oldman in this role. I think it's one of his standout roles. So, and I just want to send a quick, just real quick, 2 seconds. Alan of Press Play Streaming Studios. Press Play is good to see you this evening, bud. Hope you're having a great night. As I say to everybody when you come in. So, what in the world?
Just have this.
Okay. Okay. I'll bring that up in just a minute. For those of you that are here, you want to join, links up there. Use it, and I'll bring up Dennis's thing here. Just 1 second. Screen share. Chrome. Okay, let's try. Oh wait a minute, I got it. Hang on. All right, here we go.
He looks like Batman in year one. He looks like Gordon in year one. That's enough.
I have to. Yeah. Well, I think he also bears a slight resemblance to the design for the character design for Commissioner Gordon in the animated series.
Click on that action figure. Click on that action figure right there.
I I
Right
can't
there.
really hope.
Oh,
Okay.
that's badass.
No.
Oh wow! I didn't even know they did that.
That's badass.
Wow.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's from The Dark Knight. That's him in the
Oh,
and
man.
the tactical gear.
That's got to be
I
expensive.
I would
That's got to be
imagine.
expensive.
All right, Commissioner, I surrender. I surrender. I surrender.
Hey.
I surrender
That's
to
cool,
the
And,
man. That looks great.
Yeah, and here's another familiar face, Ferris. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Hey, Ambassador. Hey, Zach. And hey, Dennis. How you guys doing?
We're doing
Good
good.
to
We're
see
just
you.
talking. We're talking Dark Knight Trilogy. We're still working on Batman Begins. So, your initial any thoughts that you have? So, the floor is yours, bud.
All right. So, believe it or not, Batman Begins, I enjoyed it when that movie came out. I was like around 11 at that time. And when I was like around 11 or 10, I used the internet for the first time. And by the time the internet came, we all know that there's a lot of information going on when it comes to upcoming movies. And I remember like seeing the news on I think there's a website that I never used again. It's called Superhero Hype. I don't know if you guys ever used that before. And beside that, I also use comic book movies. And usually before I watch Batman Begins, I always go back and see like the previous films, like Burton's interpretation, Schumacher's interpretation, and when it comes to Batman Begins, like I always wonder, like before the movie came out, before I even use the internet, will there be another Batman movie? And thank God, thank God there is another, because let's say since the last film, it was like around I think it was around like probably 8 years after like the last movie was like Batman and Robin. That was like 1997, and Batman Begins was like 2005. Yeah, so it's been like 8 years, and I was always wondering, when do we get another Batman movie? So thankfully, when I found out on the internet, like, yes, there's another Batman movie coming up. It's going to be an origin story, which we never have one before. So then like I checked out like the internet, like it's so helpful that I get to see like other undevelopment films like after Batman and Robin. So I didn't know there was supposed to be a fifth Batman movie, with Joel Schumacher again, and so that didn't happen. Yeah, and like another, yeah, I know. So another one like Batman Dark Knight by Joel Schumacher, again, that didn't happen. So when I found out that, so when I found out that Batman Begins is going to be directed by Christopher Nolan, I didn't know who he was, to be honest. I mean, I think Batman Begins make Christopher Nolan like a household name in Hollywood. I think, because like I didn't know like his previous work, like Memento, until I got to watch like in my adult, in my 20s. I mean, has anybody seen Memento before?
I've seen pieces, but I've never seen it all the way through.
Oh, I need to watch that movie.
Yeah, I have. He's very good, man. Ferris, you should check out some of his earlier stuff. The Following was great. It's great in the way that you see a guy who is a visionary working with a crap budget. And then I think his best movie before Dark Knight, or before Batman Begins, was Insomnia with Robin Williams and Al Pacino.
I remember that movie, and I didn't even. I had completely forgotten. I remember who starred in it. I really enjoyed that film, but I completely forgot that it was a Christopher Nolan film. I will not lie to you.
That's
but I will say this: the Dark Knight trilogy really put Christopher Nolan's name out there in the atmosphere for a lot of people, and it was everybody's like first real introduction to not only Batman for some people, but to Christopher Nolan's body of work as a director. And he's had, ever since the Dark Knight trilogy, he's had some solid films. I mean, I know some people have said that they had issues with Tenet. That's fair. I can understand. I mean, I can understand where if you have an issue with the audio, you can't understand what's being said or what's going on. That takes you out of the film. I get that. So, Zach, I know you wanted to go back to Gordon, so we'll do that now, and then Ferris and Dennis will come back to you here in just a minute. Zach, go ahead.
Well, I just since we brought it up, I would highly recommend everybody check out Insomnia. It's the only film I can think of with the great Robin Williams playing a bad guy, which makes it very special. He does a killer job.
He did one other film, I think it was called 1 Hour Photo, where he also played a bad guy, quote unquote. Yeah.
Also, I know that film.
Also, in that shitty Steve Ham script that thankfully never came out for Watchmen. Remember that shitty script Steve Ham wrote for Watchmen?
Was Robin Williams attached to it?
Yeah, he was supposed to be Rorschach.
Oh God!
What?
That's a horrible choice.
I can't really picture that, to be honest.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. But the guy was a great actor. Maybe he could have done.
I don't know about that. It's a bad cast.
But then I can't imagine anyone but the actor who actually got.
No, Jackie Earl Haley as Rorschach. That was perfect casting.
He's badass.
Rorschach. No.
But I could see Robin Williams.
Opinion, just one controversial opinion. You guys are gonna hate me for that, but I don't hate you. James Jack, what's the name really? I forget.
Jackie Earl Haley.
Jackie Earl Haley. Rorschach is better than Heath Ledger as Joker.
The only other thing I know him from is Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, when they did that.
That Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Yeah, that's the only other thing I really know him from. But he seems pretty good. But I'll make my Gordon point real quick. I just wanted to say that for me, Gordon is me. That's me in the film. I see the world through Gordon's eyes easier than I see it through any other character. He's the everyman guy. He's a working man. He's a regular dude. And I think he is so important for the audience to kind of, it helps us to get into the world a little bit deeper. And if I were to say I see myself or see through the eyes of any character, it's probably Gordon.
Yes. I think that was unintentionally deliberate, because while we can relate to Bruce on certain levels, we can relate to Gordon on even more levels. Personally, because even though this Bruce Wayne is much more rooted in reality in terms of how he functions and so on, he also there's an aspect to his character that we can't necessarily relate to. But with Jim Gordon, yeah, he is very much the everyman, and I think that's something that Nolan does very well in all of his movies, where he casts strong actors or actresses as the everyman or every woman. I would even say, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but Maggie Gyllenhaal as Rachel Dawes was the every woman in a lot of ways. But we'll get to her in due course. So, Ferris, Dennis, your comments or anything else on Zach's point or anything else actually? So
no, I agree completely. I would admit. No, but yeah, I agree completely. He's the everyman. He's like I like to say, like Gordon is the most only closest thing the Batman setting has to an everyman, the regular guy in the streets, right? It's the closest thing.
Well, he felt vulnerable too. You kind of thought that he could get killed at any second, and especially in the third one, I really thought he was in deep shit in the third one.
Oh, yeah. I have to agree. Yeah.
I actually felt when they said that Gordon had died in The Dark Knight the first time I watched it. I fell for that. I don't know how, but I fell.
Yeah, well, it could be that heartbreaking scene where his wife is saying, "You did this" to Batman. Yeah. With the little kid there, it's just, it's tough.
Yeah, The Dark Knight, yeah.
Yeah, so about Gordon and about the whole Batman Begins thing. So when I first watched it, there are a lot of similarities to Batman Year One, and I know that Warner Brothers has been putting that kind of storyline to various directors back then, like in the early 2000s. We got like Darren Aronofsky almost make the project an R-rated movie. Yeah, and then Joel Schumacher also trying to get through, and even Joss Whedon. But but thank God, like elements of that.
Thank God we didn't make it. Thank God.
Well, Aronofsky
Yeah.
is an interesting guy, man. What do you think, Aronofsky?
I
in
read
my
the
opinion,
Aronofsky script. Actually, I read the
Did you?
Aronofsky script. It's actually good. I don't think it would have worked. I think it would have almost killed Batman because it was an Elseworld story again, but it's much more Elseworld than this. It's like it was an homage to 1970s vigilante movies. I call it Batwish because it's inspired by Wish. So God was supposed to be spy of Serpico, and Batman was basically Travis Bickle. Yeah, Travis Bickle. So they had that Alfred was a mechanic in a local shop that had taken Bruce after he ran away from home after his parents' death.
Well, I wasn't meaning to cut Ferris off there. I just wondered what he thought of the Aronofsky as a director for Batman. For me, he's only done one good film, which is God. What's that movie with Jared Leto about drugs?
Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah, that's for me. That's the only good movie he's done.
I never watched a movie, so I can't opinionate. I can't talk about that.
It's a fucking masterpiece. But that's the only good film of his that I like.
I think it's his directing work on Requiem for a Dream could really fit in the in the Batman in the Batman world. I think he might have made the movie like probably rated R, and I'm pretty sure like Warner Brothers would say no to that because we're also marketing it for the kids also. You know how studio executives do.
I actually have I have to read the script all the time. It's amazing, but it wouldn't have worked because it's too different from the comics. It's just too different. We couldn't have made it, but it wouldn't be accepted back then. It was supposed to be a 70s vigilante movie. That was the idea, but it's amazing. I think it's actually superior to the comic in many ways, like in the structure. For example, I'm just gonna give this one. The scene where Gordon faces his corrupt partner, Detective Flash. Remember in the comics?
Oh yeah, I remember that part.
That was in the ending. It was the last thing Gordon did before confronting the commissioner, the corrupt commissioner, the bad guy, the big bad. Before that, the last thing. It was supposed to be symbolic because the entire movie Gordon is tied up by bureaucracy, red tape, corruption, everybody's manipulating him. And in that moment, it was supposed to say, no, fuck you guys. I'm doing it myself. I'm going to fix the city.
Well,
so that was like a symbolic in the ending. So there's Kartatek. There's a Kartasis involved in the ending.
I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. It's yeah.
Well, let me just say this real quick. It makes you kind of want to get up and act because it's so similar to our real world where we have, so much injustice and we've got all these people who are corrupt officials, and you can clearly see the parallel, to what we're dealing with now.
Talk about that.
So it helps us to share Bruce's anger about what's going on in Gotham because we see similar things happen every day.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Well, and the thing I find the one dynamic I find interesting within this film is the interplay between Ra's al Ghul and Jonathan Crane. But here's the interesting thing. Crane understands his position within the grand scheme of this whole thing, and he knows that Ra's can snuff him out just like that. And I have to say it, aside from the animated version of Ra's al Ghul, Liam Neeson in this role, it was spot on. It honestly was. For me, it was spot on. I mean, Liam Neeson, he's had a few dips in his career, but by and large, he has done solid films. And this is by far one of his. I think it was one of his best roles. I mean, he is almost become iconic of Liam Neeson's career. Him playing Ra's al Ghul. and the mentorship that we see and the fallout. Okay, I'll just say it. You burn down my house, I do the same thing to you in return. He's like, except
you burn
this
down my
time,
house and left me to die. I'll do the
right,
same thing as well.
Yes, exactly.
Consider us even.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he saved his ass too, though, right?
He did, but I think
remember.
in Roz's mind, he could have potentially died. I mean, you could almost say that maybe a small plot hole in the dialogue. Maybe Roz felt that maybe he should have done more to save him. Who knows? But obviously, he survives.
Done more. He did a lot, man.
So
it goes.
Maybe
it's like it's a certain mentality that he has. You know.
Yes. Yeah, I have to. I can see where you're coming from on that, but honestly, every scene, and granted, he only has a few scenes in this entire movie. Every scene that Liam Neeson is in when he's playing Ra's al Ghul, he absolutely owns. He does, and I have to admit, I did like the idea of the decoy. I know Daniel Martin mentioned this earlier in the chat. The idea of a decoy Ra's al Ghul, instead of having the whole concept of the Lazarus pit and him being an immortal and so on. I honestly, I like the way that Nolan turned that whole concept on its head and made it more realistic. And it was a good way to make that particular dynamic about Ra's al Ghul work.
To be honest, the way I understood is that since Ra's al Ghul means head of the devil, I thought that was a legacy title.
Is that what it means?
Actually, head the demon's head.
Wow.
Because here's the interesting thing: you learned this in the animated series. In it's a two-parter where it's called The Demon's Quest, and I think it's the introductory episodes to the character of Ra's al Ghul in the animated series. And Batman or Bruce says it, Ra's al Ghul, the demon's head, because Ra's was actually wearing, in certain scenes, he was wearing it looked a little bit like a mask of Anubis, the Egyptian god of death.
That's a pretty intimidating title.
Yes, it is. And
I always thought,
go ahead, Dennis.
No, I always thought that Ra's al Ghul was a title. I come to this conclusion lately, but I always thought maybe the guy who died, Watanabe character, he was the real Ra's al Ghul, but then he died, and then the title passed to his number 2. Maybe.
I don't think so.
No, I think
not. Probably not. But I just thinking like that.
That guy got his ass kicked.
Yeah, he got. But I just
by Bruce.
Maybe.
Yeah, he got his ass kicked.
Probably not. But I just thinking it would be nice because he's supposed to be mortal. So maybe the immortality be that every time Ra's al Ghul dies, a new one arrives. A new one.
He just looked so badass that the audience, myself included, wanted him to be more significant.
Yeah. But at the same time, I can appreciate the more subtle character design and wardrobing for Ra's al Ghul in this film, and I have to admit, there's just something about this particular character that I love. I mean, he is by far one of my favorite villains within the Batman's Rogues Gallery, because he's not, at least as I would categorize it or understand it, he's not mentally unbalanced. He's just very, very driven and single-minded about his purpose and what his goal is, and he is going to use every resource at his disposal to achieve it. I think it was you, Dennis, or someone else who said that Bane was the reverse of Batman. I would actually say I would posit the argument that Ra's al Ghul is the reverse or the opposite, or the darker mirror image of Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Maybe I think that Bane is a reverse, like more literal sense, because he's training his body and mind to be perfect in this matters.
Well, you could
like,
make the argument that Ra's al Ghul has gone through just as much training as Bruce has.
Yeah.
And I would say he's just as lethal as a physical combatant as Bane is.
Probably.
So, and
I guess
I have
to, years old, so yeah, like.
And can I just comment on the fact that I love that mirror scene when they're on the train and Roz has Bruce pinned to the floor. And he says, very, very, very fatherly, very much the same way that Thomas, or Bruce's father, says, "It's okay, Bruce. It's going to be all right." And Roz says the same thing there on the train. I love how Nolan sets his scenes and sets his shots and places his dialogue for it to mirror or echo from a previous scene. And I want to send a shout out to to one of the smartest ladies on the internet, Yvette Diavol. Madam, it is a pleasure to see you as always, and nice to have a quantum physicist in the chat. So hope you're having a lovely evening or morning, my dear, and glad you're here. So
I'd like to add to what you said about that scene in particular. That's not something a villain would usually say. He's not really a villain. He's just a guy with a different mindset. And, I want to bring in two famous quotes. The first one being, "Fear an old man in a profession where men die young." This is a guy with greater experience than Bruce. So it just creates a very interesting dynamic. It's a guy who's gone through the same things in a certain way and experienced the same demons. They just came out to a different ideology. And number two, there's no reasoning with an ideologue. You can't reason with a guy like Ra's al Ghul. He's got his mindset. He's an ideologue. He's got his ideology, and he doesn't really care to change that. Depending on it doesn't matter who wants him to change. He's going to try and accomplish his goals no matter what. He's a man who can't be reasoned with, as Alfred said of the Joker.
I found interesting. I read there are many people who actually prefer Ra's al Ghul than Batman in this movie. Yeah, it makes sense because the guy has a point. He has as someone from Brazil, a country where criminals keep getting away with their crimes. It's like joke around here. We joke about that, about the fact that criminals keep getting away with their crimes here. I completely sympathize with Ra's al Ghul. Like, completely, 100%. I still think the killing of Gotham was, too much, but I sympathize with him.
Well, you can see where he's coming from. He's got the same objective as Bruce Wayne.
Well, just a mirror opposite of it. In one aspect, Bruce is trying to save Gotham. Ra's is trying to tear it all down. But
maybe cleanse. If you asked him, he would say cleanse it. Rebuild it. Make something better. It's too far gone.
Yeah, honestly, I can't say I disagree, because as a city as corrupt as Gotham would need to essentially be cleansed. And I appreciate what Ra's is trying to do. Do I necessarily agree with all of his tactics? No. But I can at least respect his reasoning. Because a corrupt system needs to be torn down. I agree with that. I agree with that idea. Do I agree with using a fear toxin to drive everyone nuts? No, I don't. I most certainly do not. I completely disagree with that particular method of achieving your goal. But at the same time, the idea itself, the premise of cleansing a corrupt city, it does have a certain virtue.
I mean, a fire is much more practical. Just saying. A bomb is much more practical. Just drop a bomb there. Done it. You've done your job, Razal. You don't need to set a fear toxin.
And to the chat, George, good evening. Good to see you, bud. And thank you for being here tonight, my man. And I'll bring up Daniel's comment as well. League of Shadows has burnt down corrupt societies for centuries. Great motive. Yeah, because didn't Roz make mention to the fact that this wasn't the first time that the League of Shadows has done something like this?
Right.
Yeah, he might be lying. Maybe, I don't know. They got the Batman Begins universe so realistic that he actually found unreasonable to have a secret
How
society.
old is the organization? We don't know how old this organization is.
He might have been founded yesterday, might have founded a billion years ago. Might be.
Well, maybe not a billion, but maybe several thousand years ago for sure.
Yeah, like, it might have been founded by Cain, the biblical Cain himself, or might have been founded by.
No, that's.
I
know. I get you, Dennis. I get you.
I just want to reference Command and Conquer. That's it. But it might have been founded by a biblical figure, or might have been founded by some random Middle Eastern, European guy in a Bad Friday. You know, it
was probably founded by a badass. Long time ago.
Yeah, definitely. So,
I just say.
Ferris,
I'm assuming.
Ferris, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say because everyone kind of jumped in first. So, yeah. Anyways,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that maybe like the League of Shadows, maybe founded by I don't know, maybe a group of like martial artists, cult or something like that, because they're all highly trained ninjas. Maybe several thousands of years, like when I don't know when martial arts was found, like in the art of I don't know ninjutsu or something. Yeah, probably one of those guys who does ninja or ninjutsu probably founded the League of Shadows and probably like train, like multiple racial people from all over the world, like probably from like maybe Africa, Middle East. I mean, they're all diverse, to be honest, for the whole members of the League of Shadows. Because I think you guys could probably pay attention to like each member, like who does not wear that mask. Like it doesn't have to be like a white guy or maybe an Asian guy. I think we probably could see like there could be a Middle Eastern under that mask, or maybe a European or Russian.
One theory I have, or at least something I want to be seen one day with the League of Shadows, is that they might not be organization in traditional, they might be ideology, like they might be a banner that a secret banner, like several groups around the world are secretly part of the League of Shadows, like several terrorist groups around mob organization, criminal organization around the world are the League of Shadows, and they are secretly all ready to go at a moment's notice. So like
kind of like Hydra.
Not that I was thinking more like kind of like Hydra. I was thinking just a more generic James Bond term, but kind of like Hydra, like,
or maybe like Spectre.
Spectre, I think it's Spectre.
That could work too. Actually, I'm assuming that probably like Bane and his mercenaries are probably like another kind of group who might work, who also work for the League of Shadows, because even though like most of them are, like all of them are ninjas because they're all mercenaries, but I think they're probably, they could do,
They mentioned they're the remnant. They're what's left of the League of Shadows after the field is forgotten. So
but the thing is in the Dark Knight Rises is that like in Batman Begins, like Batman fought like Ra's al Ghul and his ninjas, but in the Dark Knight Rises it's like Bane and his like terrorist organization or mercenary, whatever you want to call it. Because those are two different kind of groups, to be honest. I mean, I don't see like any of them do ninja stuffs.
No,
well,
they don't.
I see them as an extremist faction of the League of Shadows, an extremist faction,
Yeah, because
Like
if you
Yeah, that
remember,
could work too.
a schism, a schism.
For extremist faction, I think my theory can go a theory.
yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
I think that what we see in Rise is the full force of the League of Shadows, like coming for revenge, to kill our leader. Like we send a faction over there in Gotham to infiltrate, to destroy. Didn't work. Now we're going to send everything we have at Gotham just to get our revenge. And Bane is like sending everything he gets. The reason why they are mostly military is because the guys we see in Begins, they are like special forces. The ninjas are like the special forces of them, like the SEALs, the Deltas. Now it's Marine Corps. Get now it's the Marines, like the army. They are sending everything they got at Gotham just to get their revenge.
But here's the thing: if you remember, Talia was talking to Bruce about Bane and the fact that Roz did not approve of Bane's tactics,
Exactly.
even though he saved him because he was part of the League of Shadows. Roz felt a duty to go into that prison and rescue Bane from there. But that was as far as they went because Roz felt that Bane's tactics and his mentality and his, well, as Zach said, his ideology was too extreme.
Yeah,
so I think what happened was that Zach brought this up in the private chat, and it's okay. Perhaps there was a schism within the League of Shadows itself, and one side fell on Ra's al Ghul's particular way of thinking, and another side fell on Bane and Talia al Ghul's way of thinking. Yeah. And not to mention, and I know we're jumping a little bit ahead here, but if you consider the fact that Talia is out for revenge against Bruce, the man who murdered or caused the death of her father. We've seen the relationship between Talia and Roz in various other forms of media, in the comic books and the animated series and so on, and they've had a very tenuous relationship, even though this is his daughter. And they don't often see eye to eye, but the fact that Talia is willing to go to this extreme to not only fulfill her father's legacy, but to avenge his death, I think that was a great dynamic that was presented in The Dark Knight Rises, which we'll get into here in a little while once we come to that film.
Was she in charge of Bane?
I think perhaps, if I understand it correctly, I think perhaps they were working side by side. I don't think so much one was above the other. I think they were operating as equals. That would be my guess.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that was kind of the dynamic that I picked up on, that they were operating as equals, not so much as one in command of the other. Because I feel like this plan, as complex as it was, it takes more than one brain to come up with.
Yeah.
So I think I honestly think the dynamic there was one of equals, not of a mastermind and a henchman. I think they were both on equal footing, on equal level.
Well, so how did she die?
She died,
got killed by a car crash, right? With the truck.
Well, no. What happened? Just real quick, Dennis. Let me get this out. Just real quick, Dennis. Let me get this out. Essentially, what happens is she's in the truck that's transporting the nuclear core, and they're trying to keep Bruce and the rest of the Gotham PD and Gordon and his bunch from getting their hands on it. What ends up happening is the truck that she's in goes off of a embankment into a lower level. If you remember, some of the streets and tunnels in Gotham have 2 levels. She drives off into a gap in one of those tunnels, and the front end crashes and essentially crushes her. She lived. Well, it essentially, I think it broke her spine or caused a lot of internal injury, and she eventually died, because she does have a few lines of dialogue before she does die. She says, "Behold my father's work is
I
finished.
was never happier to see a character die than her, to be honest with you, in this whole series.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, when she stabs Bruce, I wanted her dead right there.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and she's an interesting character too, because she gets closer to Bruce than any villain throughout the entire series. She gets super close to him. She infiltrates Bruce Wayne.
Yes, she does. She infiltrates Wayne Enterprises, and she actually outdoes and outthinks Daggett and his bunch. And
well,
that
Bruce
was one
trusted
thing
her. You know, you have that scene where
Bruce
they go
trusted. Bruce trusted her emphatically. Yeah.
It was that scene. What was that scene where it's? I think it was Bruce, her, and Lucius examining the
nuclear core,
the nuclear atom core.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That was the three of them in that scene, wasn't it?
If I remember correctly, yes, I believe that's right. But I don't want to jump ahead because we haven't even touched on the Dark Knight yet. But any final thoughts on Batman Begins before we move on to the next film? So I open the floor up to you, gentlemen.
For me, wait, who's gonna go first?
Ferris, you go ahead, then Dennis, and then Zach.
Honestly, for me, I enjoy Batman Begins, and I do like how it tells a lot of the origin, because we learn a lot about how Bruce Wayne's journey, from how he lost his parents and how he became highly trained as a ninja, and all different kinds of martial arts, and becomes Batman. And yeah, it definitely it had a lot of influence to one of my favorite comic book, Batman comic, Batman Year One, and so like we learn about how, he operates, like on himself with Alfred, and then with Commissioner Gordon, played by Gary Oldman, which really good casting in my opinion. Then of course, like the villains, I love Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, and I kind of feel bad about Scarecrow, to be honest. I thought he's a really cool villain. Yeah, but he got shit a lot by like in the first, second, and the third. So I think like they could have like used Scarecrow more, probably in the middle, or maybe by the end, or something. Yeah, yeah, something like that. But overall, I mean, I still enjoy Batman Begins. It's a lot of fun, and not to mention that it also has that awesome bat suit. To be honest, I kind of wish they could have kept that suit like to the second and the third. We'll probably to wait until we talk about the Dark Knight. So I think overall, I still enjoy Batman Begins. Still favorite of mine. So like I don't know why I kind of enjoy watching Batman Begins more than the Dark Knight. But we'll talk about like Dark Knight after this.
Yeah, and I do want to bounce off one thing that you brought up, Ferris. Cillian Murphy, or I think that's how you pronounce his name, as Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow. We didn't really talk about Scarecrow all that much. He is really a very interesting character within this film, because he acts as a henchman, but he has his own agency as well. And that's one of the really interesting things, because you have a really cool dynamic, as I mentioned towards the beginning of the stream when we started, is Roz is using Crane as a means to an end, but Crane, just as his own character, isolated from everything else, he's a really good character in this story. And I have to admit that I think what they did with Crane, I think, yes, he was very much underutilized throughout this series. And for me, I'm not a huge fan. I'm not like the biggest aficionado on the character of the Scarecrow, but I would say he's one of the best Honestly, I think he is very much one of the best. And I do want to bring up a comment that Zach did believe in, did bring up. He's epic on a horse. In that scene when the riots are kicking off in Gotham after the fear toxin has been released into the Narrows, and Zach, I get what you're saying. He kind of is like Count Dooku from the prequel trilogy, where you've got Ra's al Ghul acting kind of in the Emperor position, in the Emperor role. So, but the only difference
did anyone
is,
notice?
No, go ahead, Ferris. Go ahead.
Did anyone know that Cillian Murphy actually auditioned for Batman also in that Val Kilmer suit? Has anyone seen that clip where he auditioned?
I did see it. You know, I think he's a good Bruce, but I think he's a bad Batman.
Yeah,
I kind of agree with that
exact thing.
Guys, I think I have to go now.
Oh, okay.
But can I give my final thoughts here?
Yeah, Dennis, go ahead, please. Your final thoughts on Batman Begins. The floor is yours.
Was my childhood. That's all I'm gonna say. That was my childhood. So even if I wanted to find something bad about this movie, I can't. I just can't for the benefit of my childhood. That's simply it. I love this movie. Even just for nostalgia's sake, I love this movie.
Nice to meet you, Dennis.
Yeah, Dennis, you have a good night, man. Appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time. So,
see you, Dennis.
Just one more thing.
Yeah,
I think I actually can stay, but so I'm gonna stay a little bit more. Screw it.
Right? It's your call, man. It's your call. And I want to send a shout to the chat and Neon Sci-Fi and True 31, gentlemen. Good evening. Thank you for being here. And Daniel Martin says it perfectly.
What up, Truth?
Nothing to fear. Nothing to fear but fear itself. And
just one moment. I think I'm going to go because I think Truth can collaborate much more to this podcast than I can. So
that's if Truth even wants to come in. I'm not sure. He was over on Neil's channel earlier this evening, so I don't know if he's up for another stream or not. So, but Dennis, if you want to stay, you stay. If you want to go, we understand.
I think gonna go. It was great talking to you.
Likewise.
But I have to do today. So yeah, bye.
All right.
Great.
Bye, Dennis.
Take my hat off to you.
Have a good night, bud. And I'll bring up Neon Sci-Fi's comment here. And Neon, it's been a little bit. Good to see you. I love the bait and switch, bringing Ken Watanabe and then reveal Liam Neeson was so masterful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, positively cannot disagree with that, Neon. And George, I said to say, you're just kind of going off of what I said. Cillian Murphy doesn't get enough praise for his Scarecrow portrayal. Yeah, I have to honestly agree. Yeah, if you guys are ready, I don't know how much longer you're going to want to stay, Zach, but we're going to move on to the Dark Knight. So
I've got about a half an hour. I stretched my time out a little bit. I got a half hour, but there is nothing to fear but fear itself and polio. I know it's in poor taste. I had to say it. I thought of it. Yeah, good quote though.
Yes, yeah, where do you begin with the Dark Knight? Obviously, is now 13 years old, and I've shared this story many times. And I've shared this story before. Other people have heard it. Zach, I'm going to yield the floor. The floor is yours. Yours and Ferris's right now. Go ahead, gentlemen.
I mean, it's a tough thing to even talk about. I mean, it's such a massive film, which is entirely to the credit of Nolan, and I believe his brother wrote the script. Is that correct?
Yeah, Jonathan Nolan.
Yeah, he wrote the script.
If I remember correctly.
I think that's what happened. I think his brother wrote the script, but I mean, you just have to give credit to everybody involved. I mean, for me, this is the apex of the Batman character. There's nothing better. It's tough to see somebody topping a film like this. I mean, the pacing, the suspense, the initial reaction, the performances, the Heath Ledger character. There's nothing better than this, and it's hard for me to think that there ever will be. I mean, it's a landmark film, as Michael Caine said. This is not a great Batman film. This is a great film. So I'll leave it at that.
Ferris and George, good evening. Good to see you again, bud. Ferris, the floor is yours. The Dark Knight, initial thoughts.
Well, first time, believe it or not, first time I saw The Dark Knight, I didn't get to see it on theaters. I think I was on summer vacation. So when the time, The Dark Knight was on DVD, so I have to grab it. And when I watched it, I was completely blown away, to be honest. I mean, we have learned a lot about Batman's origin in Batman Begins. We learn about his character, from Bruce Wayne and as Batman, and now when it comes to The Dark Knight, the spotlight now really runs through Heath Ledger, and he really deserved that Oscar, to be honest. I mean, it was an amazing performance. I mean, this is a Joker that has never been done, that has done something different. Because as much as I love watching the Joker in the animated series and Jack Nicholson's performance, I think when it comes to Heath Ledger's Joker, it's like the Joker with a mastermind. It's insane, to be honest. I mean, his characteristics and his motive, really, resonated with the audience and really resonated with me. And the supporting characters like Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, I love his performance also. And then of course Maggie Gyllenhaal, I was I wasn't surprised. No, not really. I was kind of surprised, wow, and they recasted what's her name, Katie Holmes to Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Rachel Dawes.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know if you agree. I think she's better in every conceivable way.
Oh, Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is really really good. I just don't know whether if I prefer Katie Holmes or Maggie Gyllenhaal, but I think they're both good in their own way, to be honest, because Maggie Gyllenhaal is kind of I think she's kind of the every woman to to Bruce and Harvey.
Well, do you know what she dropped out to do? A film called Mad Money with Diane Keaton, which was a jokey, I almost said a word I'm not allowed to say, very dumb comedy. She said no to The Dark Knight to do some stupid comedy that made $12 million.
Oh, no way.
Is this for real? And wasn't she married to wasn't she still with Tom Cruise at the time when she did that?
I think so.
But look, Ambassador, can you pull up a poster of Mad Money, and we'll show the folks out there what?
Yeah, give me a minute. I will ask, and you shall receive. Yeah,
Mad Money, and folks out there, this is what she turned down The Dark Knight. Is that not the craziest thing you guys have ever heard? Turned down The Dark Knight to do this movie.
I had no idea she turned down. I just was assumed they recasted her because a lot of people thought she was the weakest link of Batman Begins.
No, she turned it down. I mean, that's one of the craziest things I've ever heard.
Okay, hang on. 2 seconds. And to everybody that's coming into the chat, Peaceful, I don't think I've ever seen you in my chat before, so welcome this evening. Glad that you are here. And Dandelion Fluff, good to see you, madam. That was a well stream last night, and well, it is what it is. But good to see you again, ma'am, and hope you're having a great Sunday night. So, yeah, here's what Katie Holmes turned down, or what Katie Holmes did instead of The Dark Knight.
Come on, man.
What the hell?
Come on.
I mean, okay, don't get me wrong.
I've seen this, Ambassador. I've seen this film, by the way. Okay, it's not a film I wanted to see. It's a film that I saw, though. And this is a movie about a bunch of women who go in and rob a bank and then get caught at the end. Yeah, turned down The Dark Knight to star in Mad Money with Diane Keaton. Nothing against Diane Keaton, but it's like, come on. You turned down one of the greatest. I do too. Yeah, but you turned down one of the greatest films ever made in the history of the human race to star in this dumb comedy.
It's like going from a district attorney office to becoming a antagonist, sort of.
It's just dumb, man. I mean, it's like if I was her agent, I would have just dropped her. I would have dropped her for that decision. And agents don't drop people that often.
Yeah, Dandelion Fluff, I suggest you go watch Dark Knight rather than watch Mad Money.
But honestly, though, I honestly can't believe that. Like, oh my God! Oh, and look what you. I feel like if I were her, like, are you really gonna shit your career just by turning down this and take that? Like, what?
Tanked in the box office. When's this is probably the first time you guys have ever heard of Mad Money, right?
Yeah.
Nobody cares about that movie.
To be honest, yeah. Oh, dear Lord, Dandelion, you poor woman. Go watch The Dark Knight. Save yourself. And, well, Daniel Martin, I don't know because I can't remember she was still with Tom Cruise at the time because I think this is right around the time when she got the hell away from him and all that Scientology nonsense. So, I honestly don't know.
I thought that was when she was in Jack and Jill.
Oh.
Was she in Jack and Jill?
Yeah.
I've never seen the movie because there were just some movies with Adam Sandler I refused to watch.
I have seen
I skipped that one.
I have seen it.
You've seen Jack and Jill?
I have seen Jack and Jill.
Zach, I thought you were classy. I thought you didn't watch bad movies. What the heck, dude?
To be honest with you, I'm somewhat of a glutton for bad films. I like them. I like them just as much as I like good ones. I got a kick out of it. And here's the sad part: is you have Al Pacino in the film. Did you know that? I know. Jack and Jill. What Sandler does. I'm sorry to but I'll be real quick. What Sandler does.
Go ahead. You're fine.
Why does a film like Jack and Jill have an $80 million budget? Did you know that? It had an
$80.
It had. Can you look up the budget? Would you do that and put it on the thing? All of Sandler's films, all of his films have like an $80-90 million budget. And what he does is he brings in David Spade for 7 weeks and pays him $10 million. That's what's going on, is he's like funneling money to his buddies. And it's not really cinema, in my opinion. I mean, and not to shit on Adam Sandler.
Hell?
That's what's going on, guys.
Hold on. I can't. I could maybe see 79 million for Pixels because of all the effects, but for Jack, what?
Ambassador, Jack and Jill had zero effects, as I told you. I saw it.
Yeah, I
$79 million budget. What's going on here is Adam Sandler is using the studio system and his audience, his fans, to funnel money to himself and his buddies. Adam Sandler takes a $20 million fee off the top and then takes a $5 million fee as a producer. And then the rest of the money goes to his buddies.
Damn.
Jeez, okay.
Talk about sabotage.
That's what's going on. Not to shit on him. I thought he was great in Uncut Gems, but that's what's happening with Adam Sandler.
Okay, well, let's get back to a much more pleasant topic, The Dark Knight.
Yeah, for overall, overall, I love The Dark Knight for a Joker story because, to be honest, though, we never learn much about the Joker, like, in his backstory. Probably just a glimpse of his backstory. Not like Burton's Joker with Nicholson. I mean, that Batman 89 movie, literally tells like his origin of how he became Joker. But this one in The Dark Knight, he just like straight up as Joker and immediately becomes the anarchist Joker that we all know. But overall for the Dark Knight, a really good movie. I mean, a really good story. I just wish that it had a lot of darkness in it, but I just kind of wish that I never want to get suck the fun out of watching The Dark Knight. I wanted to watch it like fun. For the first time I watched it, it was like very story wise, very like crime drama ish. But I kind of wish like it like watching Batman Begins, like you have fun in it, but but in The Dark Knight, like I feel like most of the time I felt like the fun got sucked out of it. It just sucked in the darkness, if you know what I mean.
Well, I have a different take, but that's okay, Ferris. George, good to see you again, bud. I know you haven't had a chance to really say anything, so the floor is yours, my man. The Dark Knight.
First of all, happy 13th anniversary to The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I didn't.
13 years of greatness.
Happy 13th anniversary.
So, George, go ahead. The floor is yours.
The first time I saw The Dark Knight was probably around the time I started being more serious about watching films, like actually getting into like other kinds of films than the films that I was watching like as a child. And really, I think The Dark Knight nailed basically every element. Like, even to this day, you have obviously the action element, the crime element, the love story element, even like the humor when it's not trying to be intentionally funny. It still finds a way to make you laugh every now and then, whether it's like a line that Morgan Freeman, Lucius Fox is saying, or Michael Caine's Alfred is saying. So like they've nailed every aspect of this film. And like again, Heath Ledger's Joker is just phenomenal, and Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent / Two-Face just doesn't get talked enough about, particularly like his character arc and like the significant line that he says, where you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Like, this isn't just a great comic book movie; it's one of the all-time greatest films for me. It's one of my top 3 favorite films of all time.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree with you, George, to be honest. I do want to address what Ferris had to say. There are dark films out there that I find very enjoyable. I actually did. This was back about a year or so ago. Actually, it was last year. I did a stream talking about why we are attracted to darker toned films. And I did talk about The Dark Knight. I think for myself, and I'm not going to speak for anyone else, obviously, but myself here. I like going to that place sometimes because when I say that place, I mean go to that darker place to explore the darker elements of the human psyche and human behavior. Because I guess maybe it goes back to my seminary education and maybe just the fact I have had exposure to different philosophical theories and ideas and so on. But I appreciate the story where it ends on a very downbeat note, for the simple fact that when everything is when everything is going well and everyone is fine, that story can become a little boring. But it's when you really put everybody down into the mud and the mire and they have to fight their way out, that's when things get interesting. And I think why I mean, as you said, George, The Dark Knight is a masterpiece of a film. It is within my top 10 of greatest films of all time. And it's great not just because it is a great comic book movie. It is great because it is a great movie that was crafted by people who know how to do good film. And that for me was the real treat. And I'll bring this up just very quickly. When me and my friend, we walked out of the theater and we were walking back to my car because we drove together. That's beside the point. I remember to this day the expression on our faces after when we left. And I looked at him and he looked at me. We were like, we had this understanding, like we had just seen something truly exceptional. And when I had heard that they nominated posthumously Heath Ledger for his role as the Joker, I was like, he deserved it. This movie showed what a great director, a great writer, and a great cast can do when they're given the chance to do it. And that's just among one of the many reasons why I love The Dark Knight. So, that being said, gentlemen, the floor is open. Go for it.
Well, I put a clip in here, and I'm wondering if you can play this timestamp. And this regards the humor.
Zach, I didn't even know that, but I will not share it. But respect to you, sir.
I did that a few years ago. Yeah.
Dude, that's respect to you. Yeah, I'll bring this up. You're welcome. Well, we can talk about it later. So,
all right.
And of course, there's always a freaking clip or a freaking ad. Skip ads.
Oh, yeah. Hang on. You know what? You should get ad blocker, Doug.
It's okay. It's not the worst thing ever. I'll probably get a claim on this. I'll probably have to clip this out. So, but
no, it's like 10 seconds. And
where is it that you want me to? 320. Gotcha.
And if you can turn it up as loud as you can, because it's kind of quiet.
I will do what I can. I've got the volume maxed out on my end on the player, so that's honestly all I can do.
Let me give a preface to this. This is the scene where the Joker is following Harvey Dent throughout the tunnels of Gotham, and there's these little moments with the Joker, and there's a bunch of little funny scenes throughout the Dark Knight, but this is one of them. What the Joker's reaction to Batman showing up.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, hang on.
Because we can presume that the Joker thought he was chasing Batman.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is it up? Is it showing? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna play as little of this as possible because I don't want to get in trouble. How long do I need to run this for? Like 10 seconds?
Until the Joker
roughly
says what he's gonna say.
Okay.
There you go. Did you hear me? He goes,
I did.
See,
Yeah, I did.
There's a bunch of little funny moments.
Yes, honestly, yeah, that for me, that is a very, very, that's a very nice little comedic nod in that scene. So yeah, like, he's like,
Yeah, no, that's one of the funniest parts for me. I mean, there's a bunch of funny parts throughout the film. I mean, I get what Ferris is saying. It is a dark film. There's no doubt about that. But I can laugh at some of the darker elements. I mean, the Joker, to me, Ambassador, is a demonic sort of character. He reminds me of a demon. That's kind of how I see him. He has a demonic quality to him. And I watched the film maybe 2 years, and I've seen it after that since. I think the last time I saw it was maybe 3 months ago, but I'd seen it a couple of years ago, and the realization came to me that this is a demonic character. Is kind of how he struck me.
I'd say that's not a bad interpretation. I've never actually heard that interpretation. I don't know if I would necessarily call him demonic, but that's your take. I would definitely call him. I said this the other day. I never viewed the Joker as insane. Maybe suffering from maybe some PTSD or something along those lines, but definitely not insane. Because
Depends on which interpretation, actually.
Say that again, Varys?
Depends which interpretation that you want to adapt, but I think like most of the Joker stuff that is adapted into the Dark Knight is probably like original. I think. I mean, it wasn't like based on anything that I ever seen on comic books before. I mean, most of the Joker in the comics are like very like insane psychopathic type of character, and sometimes comedic. I mean, like comedic, you go back to like Cesar Romero, like gangster style. You go back to Nicholson, but in this one, in the Dark Knight, is very like it's like highly original, I would say, and not based on anything, anything never seen before. Like you gave Joker, like a big brain with kind of a humorous part, and that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Zach's going to have to head out, so I'm going to give him the last word, and then George and Ferris will carry on. So, Zach, the floor is yours, bud. Your final thoughts.
I mean, I'm going to comment on the Joker. I mean, following off my previous statement, he does seem like a demonic character, and that's not to draw religion into it, but the general public sense of what a demonic figure would look like. I mean, there's something evil, disturbing, just creepy about him. I mean, even watching the performance is actually creepy, which is hard to do. I mean, I can't think of another performance that makes my skin crawl as much as his, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Let's be clear about that. But watching the character is so creepy when he's in that room with Gamble, and sir, we've just killed the Joker. 500,000 dead. All right, whatever the line was, but that scene. And just the way that he talks and the presentation of it and the makeup, there's something about the Joker that really creeps me out. But I love the character. One of my favorite villains of all time. But there's something about that performance in particular, and it could have to do with the death of Heath Ledger as well. That may be a factor, but there's something super creepy and disturbing about the Joker in The Dark Knight.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to point out something though, because
I gotta run. So thank you guys, Ambassador. Good to see you, George, Ferris. Take it easy, guys.
Take care, Zach.
All right. Yeah, take care, Zach. See ya. I just want to point out real quick, like when Heath Ledger was casted, there are a lot of controversy. Like the same thing that happened with Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck before, because when Michael Keaton was casted back then, like nobody could see him in the role because he's very a comedic guy, and everyone thought that like Batman would get into like the 66 comedy again. Then when the movie came out, like he stole the show. Then when it comes to Heath Ledger, everyone thought that he would make Joker look kind of flamboyant, but thankfully not. But again, like his powerful performance really carries the film. Like that is something rare, to be honest, because Heath Ledger, like the movies that I've watched before The Dark Knight is like 10 Things I Hate About You and A Knight's Tale, because he's kind of like the boyish charm kind of actor, because he does have charm. He's very charismatic, and yet going into the Dark Knight, like everyone thought like oh my god, that gay cowboy is gonna be the Joker. I think that's like that's like other people's opinion, but for me it was like, what, the guy from A Knight's Tale is gonna be a Joker? Like, okay, I'll just have to wait and see. I mean, that's for me, but everyone else was like, that gay cowboy is the Joker, believe it or not. Like, okay, I haven't even watched Brokeback Mountain until like in the Dark Knight. until maybe I think I was in my 20s when I first watched Brokeback Mountain, and okay, now I know why people were like shitting a lot on his casting as the Joker, but my God, he does give a powerful performance as the Joker. Yeah, I think like his untimely death before the film's release, everyone thought that he's gonna suck, but he didn't suck after all. And again, it's a sad thing that we didn't see much of him or even get a mention in the last and final film. That's the sad thing about his Joker.
Yeah, I have to agree. Speaking for myself, I never really had an issue because I had seen some of for heaven's sake, sorry. I had seen some of Heath Ledger's films. I had particularly seen the 10 Things I Hate About You, which is a modern adaptation of Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare. And I had seen, obviously, A Knight's Tale, which I love. I love that movie. So I didn't really have an overreaction or anything. I was just like, this guy. Okay. And I have to admit, I didn't know what to expect from his part, but when I looked at the posters for The Dark Knight, and I was like, this is honestly kind of creepy, particularly anything that was related to the Joker, particularly with that one where it's got the blood-smeared smile and it's got written in blood on the glass. Why so serious? And you see the Joker all distorted. You couldn't really make him out that well. I think that particular poster design was deliberate because we don't really know who the Joker is or where he comes from even. And I mean, we only see one scene where he isn't wearing the makeup, and that's when Jim Gordon gets shot at the funeral for the police officers. And just to see him without the makeup and just see him in the face prosthetic, I can understand now because I've got the visual in my head what Zach was saying about Joker being somewhat demonic, because him without the makeup, there is somewhat of a very creepy or otherworldly or semi-demonic look to his appearance. So, but George Ferris, your thoughts on anything I had to say, or just on the movie?
I'll be honest, because I was young when I saw The Dark Knight. That was the first time I've seen Heath Ledger in a film. The second time was The Patriot. So, like, I wasn't aware of Brokeback Mountain and A Knight's Tale, but I know, like, obviously he was phenomenal in The Dark Knight. He was also very good in The Patriot as well. So,
yes,
and so again, because I was like very young and I really didn't pay attention to movie news at that time. I think it was like later on I started paying more attention to movie news, because like I said, that was around the time I started taking movie watching, I wouldn't say more seriously, but I was more into it, like as a hobby. So I never really had a problem with the casting. I think it's just sad though that he wasn't around to see like how well received he was, like how he proved everyone wrong. That's the sad thing.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Ferris.
Let's not forget one thing though, because I think when it comes to casting, Christopher Nolan actually knows what he's doing and how he wants to pick, the actors for the right role. And I mean, let's be clear. Like when Heath Ledger was cast, we all didn't know that the charming knight from A Knight's Tale and the gay cowboy from Brokeback Mountain would be a good Joker. And the same thing again from like in The Dark Knight Rises, like the chick from Princess Diaries. We all didn't know that she would make a good Catwoman, but she nailed it. But then again, like the young Picard from Star Trek, we didn't know like would be a good Bane. I think I think like Christopher Nolan knows how to like cast like people and give like the right material to act their part. And to be honest, I think that's like the coolest thing about how Christopher Nolan would handle a character.
Well, honestly, the interesting thing for me is if you look at the actors that Christopher Nolan has worked with throughout his career, he has a very good eye for for actors that have done lesser known stuff or stuff that might have had a broad fan base, but isn't like widely known. So, but I have to say that the casting for Dark Knight and the casting for Dark Knight Rises in terms of Ledger and Anne Hathaway, from speaking for myself, granted, I know these actors from these other roles that they have portrayed, but I never pigeonhole them into one particular role that they play. I look at the body of their work and I say, do they have the potential to carry off this character well? And I think it was I think that Dark Knight came out maybe just a few years before Anne Hathaway would do the film version of Les Mis. Or it was right in that same time period, give or take. And Anne Hathaway has the capacity to be a good dramatic actress. She doesn't always have to be pigeonholed as a comedic actress. She's a good actress. And if you look at the character of, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, and we'll get back on Dark Knight here in just a second. Anne Hathaway as Selena Kyle works because you believe that she is a career thief, a career cat burglar, and she portrays the character well because she's given a good script, she's given good direction, but she has the talent and the skill to carry off a character like that. The same is true of Heath Ledger. You give him a strong script and you give him strong direction, and you give him the opportunity to go into this character and play around with it, and this is what you get. You get an Academy Award-winning performance. And considering the fact that this is perceived as a comic book movie or a superhero movie, that is saying a lot. That is really saying a lot. And I do want to bring up Dandelion Fluff, her comment here. And I do want to send a shout to the chat, Marcus Cruz. Good evening, Marcus. Thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it as always. Thank you for your support. I've seen him in stuff, but I didn't have any thoughts one way or another of him being cast as a Joker. He was always a good actor in whatever he was in. And she also says, Anne Hathaway plays loads of diverse roles. Yeah, that's true. And the same can be said for Christian Bale. I mean, before this, he had never really done a superhero movie of any type. I mean, he does play John Connor in one Terminator film, obviously. But you look at some of the other roles. I mean, obviously, American Psycho. I think it's called The Machinist or The Mechanic or something like that. The Bale was
The Machinist, actually. That he became really skinny.
Yeah, that's one of the things I remember about that movie. I've never actually watched it. I really feel like I need to. I've heard good things about it. But what Nolan does with his castings is he puts the people in the places where he wants them. And then he just kind of says, okay, now go. And amazingly, or maybe not amazingly, but oftentimes it works. And I like the fact that this particular Joker isn't an adaptation of any other Joker we've ever met before. I mean, like, I think it was, I can't remember if it was you, George, or you, Ferris, that made this comment. He comes off as more of the anarchist version of the Joker, which I think is appropriate, particularly if you're looking at the dynamic of this film. While Gotham is kind of dragging itself out of the corruption that's been mired in for so long, the corruption still exists. And you've got the triumvirate of Batman, Jim Gordon, and Harvey Dent. They're trying to fight against it. But Joker knew who to go after, because He knows how to read people. I love that scene. I know a lot of people focus on certain elements of the scene where the Joker interacts with the mob bosses for the first time. But when he says, Batman will get him and make him squeal, I know the squealers when I see them, and he just goes, you, Mr. Lau, you're the squealer. And amazingly, or maybe not amazingly, he was right. That's what is great about this particular portrayal of the Joker. He's a cerebral opponent for the Batman. Not so much physically intimidating, but definitely mentally and cerebrally intimidating. So, but Ferris, George, your thoughts?
And also, like, in those scenes where, like, he's holding the knife to Gamble's face and then, like, to Rachel's face, and he's, like, talking about, like, his past, like, how, like, abusive his father was, and, like stuff that happened with him and his wife. Like, well, you don't really know if that's truthful or not, but maybe, like, if that stuff was true, that probably explains, like, why, like, he is the way that he is. We really don't know about his past, only, like, little hints that may or may not be true, which I find to be very interesting. Like, we really don't know what made the Joker the way that he is in this film. Like, in the past, we always kind of had an idea of his origin story, but here it's like we really don't know what makes him tick.
Yeah, and that's what makes him truly intimidating and truly menacing, is the fact that we don't know what exactly makes him tick. He is an anarchist. He is perceivably sociopathic, as Dandelion Fluff brought up a few minutes ago. But we don't know for sure. But you finally get a handle on him when he's hanging upside down outside of that building after Batman foils foils his attempt to kill all of those hostages. He's like, I took Gotham's light knight and I brought him down to our level. You see, insanity is like gravity. All it requires is a little push.
I got one thing to comment though about.
Yeah, go ahead, Ferris.
Yeah, so the thing about like Heath Ledger's Joker is that he's a very like you said, he's cerebral, and yet really much of a mastermind. And he attempt to get like news on TV about the fake Batman with like what's his name? I think his name is Brian. I think he took off that mask and yeah. He said in front of the camera, like, I'm a man of my word. And that's like the moment, like, we all kind of get creeped out. And then the moment that we all didn't know that would make, like a big impact in the movie is when he gets, people of Gotham, to like both, to a boat, all right, even with the prisoners from, I don't know, Blackgate Prison or from Arkham.
Blackgate Prison.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah. So like I'm like, wow, like he knows how to make this plan work. Like we never seen like Joker does something like that before, but we all know he, like, in the Byrne movies, he tried to like give like a laughing gas in Gotham, but when it comes to the Dark Knight, he wants to bring all those people in Gotham, make them hostages, even the prisoners in Blackgate Prison, and wanted them to pull, like the trigger to blow them up, which is like, my God, this guy really is like an anarchist. I mean, he is just like completely. I don't want to say insane, but he is insane, and yet yet another thing insane but smart. Yeah, he knows how to like challenge his enemies, even like GCPD and Batman, like mentally. Like that's like the beauty of that character. We don't know about his backstory, but we all know what he's like as a character. I think that's like the beauty and uniqueness of what Heath Ledger's Joker brings to the movie.
Yeah. George, your thoughts, bud?
Yeah, like the blowing up thing, like he really wanted to like his goal. One of his goals was to like make people stoop down to his level. Like he tried pushing Batman to the limit to try and kill him. He was hoping that one of the boats would like blow the other one up, and the one boat had like innocent people that were for the most part like never would kill anyone or never killed anyone, and he was hoping that they would probably blow up the prisoners on the other boat. And even though like Batman and those people didn't stoop to that level, and even the prisoners didn't stoop to that level, he still won because he turned the one person that everyone thought would be the last person to do anything like horrible in Harvey Dent to basically there's that angle.
Yeah, and Neon Sci-Fi, he brings up a good comment. Like a demon, the Joker brings out the worst in people, putting people in compromising situations. Demonic.
Yeah,
I think
would
Zach.
say that too.
I think Zach was onto something. I didn't disagree with Zach's assessment by any stretch, none whatsoever. But it's really it's an angle that I never really considered before. The thing with the Joker is we don't know where he comes from, what his real name is. We don't know anything about him. We know that he, Daniel Martin brought it up just a minute ago. I'll bring up his comment here. 1 second. The YouTube theory was that he was ex-military is kind of interesting. Yeah, I have to admit, considering his expertise with explosives, his expertise with interrogation tactics, his expertise with limited hand-to-hand combat, I definitely think he's ex-military for sure. There's just too much there's too much good circumstantial evidence there to not point to the fact that this guy was probably ex-military. Now, whether he was honorably or dishonorably discharged, or he got a section 8, whatever the case may be, he's definitely unbalanced, and he's got a certain skill set that makes him very, very dangerous. And when you pit a character like the Joker, who has all this expertise and he's got his own mission and his own goal, even though we don't really know what his goal is. I mean, when he says to Harvey, after Harvey gets injured, he's like, "I'm like a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I even caught it." He's like, "Do I look like a person with the plan?" I don't usually do a good Joker. For some reason tonight I'm doing it better. Creepy, huh?
Yeah.
But honestly, oh no, Sci-Fi, you're fine, bud. No worries. I'm glad you're here, regardless whether you get watching it right now or watching it later from earlier in the stream. Don't matter to me. I'm just happy you're here. So, but yeah, to see all of the people that the Joker interacts with, and to see a different reaction every single time, really shows you just how chameleon-like the Joker is. So, because he changes his story every time when he's talking about, "Do you know how I got these scars? You see, my father was a drinker and a fiend. And one night he went off crazier than usual. Mom got the kitchen knife to defend herself. Dad didn't like that. Not one bit. He takes the knife away from her and goes to work her with it, laughing as he does it. He comes at me with the knife and he says, "Why so serious?" I'm sorry, that every line of dialogue that Joker says is chilling.
That's his iconic line.
Why so serious?
I just gotta say though about Harvey Dent, and to be honest,
please, go ahead.
Yeah, to be honest though, like I never thought like this new version of Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart, like
Mhm.
I have no idea that he would become like Two-Face the moment like Joker ruined his life, takes away Rachel, and yeah, and like in the comments, like what Neon Sci, I think it was Neon Sci-Fi who said bring the worst out of people.
Yes.
Was
Mhm.
it? Yeah, yeah. That is like the one thing like I do love about Heath Ledger's Joker is that yeah, since that he's the mastermind, but he also brings the worst out of people to like join his side
Mhm.
eventually. But yeah, but at the end, but the end of it, but the end of it, of course, like he got caught, and of course, like his people, that he brings out the worst, like Harvey dies, uh, and yet
Mhm.
the thing is, like this version of Harvey Dent is still like a really good character. I really thought that they could have used him a lot, in the movie. But I'll say one thing though, like after this movie, a lot of like my friends online, after watching it, like one of them like recommend me like, dude, you should go or read Batman the Long Halloween. And when I read the Long Halloween, like oh my god, like elements of this story like are being like adapted into the Dark Knight, like they have their original, their original like kind of story like inspired by the Long Halloween. I'm pretty sure you guys read the Long
Uh,
Halloween. It becomes one of
I
my favorite.
I own a copy of The Long Halloween, and yes, um, I have to say that there are certain elements of The Long Halloween and The Dark Knight. Absolutely, is it a complete, total, faithful adaptation? No, it's not. George, did you have anything you wanted to comment on? I don't want to. I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
I got some things to add to your
Yeah,
theory about
please.
him being ex-military.
Please.
So obviously, what you mentioned, but also like in the scene where like they're having like the memorial for Commissioner Loeb and like Gordon gets shot, like the way he like constructs himself, like blending in, knowing like the procedures of when to shoot and like how to like act, and also like the scene in the hospital where he talks about how like if like a bus load or like a tank load of like soldiers die, no one's gonna bat an eye. Like specific stuff like that kind of give you a hint. And maybe that's like another reason why he's so messed up, because maybe he lost comrades and no one in the military and no one did a thing about it. Like we really don't know what made this guy go off.
Yeah, that is something that could potentially have happened to him. The line of dialogue that he says to Dent is, and I do want to come back to very sure point about Harvey here in just a second. He's like, if nobody reacts, even if the plan is terrible, because it's all part of the plan. And he's not wrong, because we witness every day on the news horrible things happening. And I'm not going to get into a bunch of real life stuff here. I'm just using this as an illustration. And we almost go, well, yeah, that tracks. It happens, and it stinks that it happens. But if as he says, if I say I'm going to kill a couple of gangbangers, everybody loses their mind. The Joker, whoever he is, knows how people tick. And I don't want to say that he has some sort of psychiatric or psychological or sociological training, although that could be a possibility. But it just adds to the menace of this character, of this particular portrayal of the Joker. And that, for me, is one of the other highlights of Ledger's performance. But Ferris, to get to your point of Dent, if you consider the scenes that we have with Harvey and with Rachel, you can very much tell that he is very much in love with her, and she does care for him deeply. And they have a very playful and a very sweet relationship. All granted, it is a working relationship because they obviously work together for the prosecutor's office there in Gotham. But I think what breaks Harvey is the fact that he trusted Batman and Gordon to go after Rachel and not him. But Bruce and Batman and Gordon realize that their plan hinges very strongly on keeping Dent alive. So they place their plan seemingly above the well-being of Rachel's life. But much like what the Flash says to Bruce in BVS, she is the key. Rachel Dawes is the key to Harvey Dent. And Joker, for whatever reason, knows that they are an item. We don't know how, but he knows that they are an item, and he knows that he can go after her. And obviously he does. He goes after her, and he goes after Harvey. And when he shows up in that hospital, in that nurse's uniform, the way he plays Harvey is ingenious. He's like, I didn't kill Rachel. That was Maroni's. That was Falcone's. That was Maroni's men that did that. I was locked up in Gordon's cage, and he's like, "You were a schemer. You had plans, but now you're just like me." And he's able to turn Harvey into Two-Face. I mean, when Gordon is standing there in Harvey's room and says, "What was that name? What was that name they had for me down at Internal Affairs or IA or your unit?" And Gordon's like, "I don't remember." He's like, "Say it." He's like, Two-Face, the Harvey Two-Face. He's like, "Why should I change who I am now?" And that right there is where Harvey Dent, or Harvey Two-Face, is born. And there is a similar instance in the animated series. I don't know if either one of you have watched the animated series. Have you? From the 90s?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Is it the two-part Two-Face episode?
It is. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Something very similar happens in that episode where it isn't so much that he gets burnt in a fire set by the Joker, but his face gets disfigured by a mobster in a courtroom scene. They actually use that particular origin story point for Batman Forever. Although we don't see it or anything live, we see it in a piece of video footage. That's they play with that particular origin point, but I think what Nolan did was he kept enough of the original origin for his own story, and I think it works very, very well in this instance. So, but I feel like I've kind of run off at the mouth. George and Ferris, I'm gonna let you have the floor. So the floor is yours.
I gotta say something about when it comes to adaptation about of the characters like the Rogues Gallery. I mean, going back to Batman Begins, Ra's al Ghul really has that. He really has that martial arts background, but again, he was born like probably centuries ago in the comics. But then he's immortal because of the Lazarus Pit. But since in adaptation, like to quote Christopher Nolan, I remember he always says, "I've got a Batman film, but I want it to be real." So it's all based on realism. So I guess like the realism of Batman Begins when it comes to adapting Ra's al Ghul. It kind of works without having the immortality of the Lazarus Pit in it. I don't know, and I don't know about the Scarecrow though, because sometimes he could be, sometimes he could be kind of scary. But in the comics, he is kind of scary. But in the movies, he could have a potential, but at the end, he's underutilized. But when it comes to like the Dark Knight with having Joker, yeah, because we all know in the comics that he is, he's psychotic. He's a clown. He's a clown exactly. But when it comes to the movies and having him that kind of anarchist way and a potential theory that he might be an ex-military, like okay, that is some realism shit that Nolan likes to put on into the movie. Okay, and the same thing goes to Harvey Dent. I mean, he doesn't have that like split personality like in the comics and the animated series where he has this dual personality like himself and the other guy like Two-Face. Yeah, but I think like the way like Nolan wants to put like the Rogues Gallery of Batman is that if have a sense of realism, and I think like some ways of adapting could it really works as it is in the movies. But I would have loved to see some comic elements like in the movie, but then again, like with Christopher Nolan taking over the franchise, he he really knows how to do realism and adapting the character with realism, and not to mention that he works with David Goyer. He's basically the story. He's the story writer from Batman Begins all the way to The Dark Knight Rises. He's not really the best. He's not really one of the best writers. And I mean, he made some really bad projects, and there are some undeveloped projects that I would have loved him to see. I mean, he was supposed to like direct a Flash movie with Ryan Reynolds as Barry Allen or Wally West and Green Arrow Supermax. I would have loved to see that, but that didn't really happen. But I guess like when it comes to like working on the story for the Dark Knight trilogy by making it as real as possible, like I think like Nolan knows like how to handle these characters in a realistic way of how they should be portrayed in real life. That's what I think. I mean, he's not. I don't know if he's a comic book guy, and I think he loves the character, and I think he probably like just pick which villain and let's see, is this perfect for for this movie, or is it perfect for like in the real world or something? Like he knows how to do his stuff, to be honest. Maybe George could add that up if you have something in mind.
I just like how, like, even though it may not be always 100% accurate, Nolan understands Batman and these characters. That's why it always frustrates me when people whine about how inaccurate he can be when he is accurate. He knows how to take inspiration from things. Like you said before, Ambassador, like The Long Halloween has inspiration written all over it with The Dark Knight. Obviously, Batman Begins, going back to Batman Begins, year one inspiration. And then later on with The Dark Knight Rises, you have Nightfall inspiration. Just because it's not always 100% accurate doesn't mean he doesn't understand it. And he does understand it, even like taking inspiration from the animated series, whether it's with Two-Face or incorporating like a certain character that was just introduced in the series and just like putting it in there in a small role, like the one character from Dark Knight Rises, Daggett.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Roland Daggett. Yeah. Honestly, when it comes to comic book films, I'm okay with the stories being adapted. I'll give you all an example, and I may actually cover this movie at some point down the road. Days of Future Past, X-Men: Days of Future Past. I remember I have a copy of the trade paperback of the story, and I love it. I love that story more than it's up there with one of my all-time favorite comic book storylines. When they announced that Bryan Singer was coming back, and this is before we knew some of his shenanigans, to put it mildly.
Oh,
when I heard that he was coming back to do this film, I was like, finally. Now the question is, can he pull it off? And it was actually, to remove the whole sentimentality of it, it was the first film me and Mam Ambassador saw when we started dating. Just speaking from, as always, speaking for myself, it was I think, a beautiful and a brilliant adaptation of that story. The thing we have to remember is all stories are going to go through some form of adaptation from one degree to another. Now, granted, we have gotten a DC animated film version of The Long Halloween. I have not had a chance to see it. I've seen a few clips on YouTube, and what I have seen is pretty faithful to the book that I own. And I eventually will get around to watching it and everything, or buying a copy of it at some point, whatever the case may be. But what Nolan did with his trilogy is he took certain elements that would work for the story that he wanted to tell and implanted them into his story. But he crafted his own story around those particular elements. While those particular elements from these other well-known stories like Year One or The Long Halloween or Nightfall do exist in these stories, the thing we have to remember is the stories stand on their own because they are the director's vision. He might take inspiration from other places, and any good director worth their salt is going to do that. These are still his stories. They're not an adaptation of the ones that we know. This is Nolan's story that he's telling. It just happens to take place in the Batman universe and in the DC universe. But George, Ferris, your thoughts on anything I just brought up?
I'm glad to see. First of all, I'm glad to hear you give love to Days of Futures Past. I think that is a fantastic movie as well. So I'm glad to see it's getting some love, because a lot of people
I love that.
hate on it because of the whole timeline confusion with the X-Men. But I love that film. It was one of those films that I got to see with one of my close friends back when I was still in high school, and we had a great time with that film.
Oh yeah,
but
whenever I get to start putting together my next set of streams and everything, it's going to be in there, because I'm actually looking at maybe in the next few months or so. I don't know when exactly, but I'm definitely looking at some in the next few months. I'm definitely going to go back into the X-Men franchise. So, because
Oh, yeah,
I love those. Go ahead, Ferris.
Yeah, sometimes when it comes to comic book adaptations, like when you're adapting like the one story like from a trade paperback or a graphic novel, yeah, there are certain elements that you probably wanted to change when it comes to films. Like sometimes, like when you're adapting, if you're adapting a comic book, like sometimes people there are people like who wants to see like stay like a comic book, but when you're turning it into a movie, like you do want to have a sense of realism, and that's kind of a debate at sometimes. And when it comes to Batman Begins, and the Dark Knight, Batman Begins really feel like an origin, like where Bruce Wayne comes from and how he ended up losing his parents and on his way to become who he is, who is known to be in Gotham City. And that's like that's like whatever like images in the graphic novel that you think that didn't make there. The thing that you need to understand is that like a director's vision sometimes could be very different than what like the audience or the fans wanted, but at the end of the day, like the director is the one telling the story and how he wanted the audience to see. And I think like Christopher Nolan did well with with Batman Begins, trying to be a loose adaptation of Batman Year One or any other Batman origins, in the comics. And when it comes to the Dark Knight, it's very much like like what people think, like, okay, this is like how Long Halloween, but I think it adds more like Christopher Nolan thing, like add some crime drama, add more realism, and add something add something different to it. I think like each directors like probably bring different a different kind of interpretation of a comic book adaptation or a graphic novel adaptation. And when it gets to Days of Future Past, I mean, if we get to the X-Men franchise as general, I do love the first X-Men movie for its original story. I mean, they got their character right. I mean, each character may be different, in adaptation, but we can still identify them like what they are like in the comics. To be honest, like, yeah, Wolverine, the loner, and of course, Professor X is the headmaster, Cyclops the leader, and Jean Grey somehow becomes the doctor. Storm is the second in command and teacher. That is still, a well proper adaptation, even though I still have issues with, how they adapted Rogue into to that movie. And but the second one by Bryan Singer, it's pretty okay, even though it's too much centered on Wolverine, because it still has elements of the one comic that they're adapting, and that is God Loves Man Kills by Chris Claremont. And yeah, I have that I have that copy, to be honest. He still knows how to, Bryan Singer knows still how, like, he may read a comic book but not that much, but his writing team really he wants to ask his writing team to, like, pick a storyline, like, what do you think of this, and okay, let's adapt this, and let's make something different than what it is in the comics. So okay, but I think X2 is just okay. And when it comes to X3, Bryan Singer would have done it very differently. And I've, read like the interview with his writers, and I swear to God, like, why wouldn't Fox just use Bryan Singer's writing team to adapt the story with a different director? I mean, I love Brett Ratner. I mean, I love the Rush Hour films, but okay, The Last Stand is I didn't really like it, to be honest. It's not what I don't think it's what Bryan Singer would do to adapt.
No.
Because it's a structural mess of a story and adaptation. It's not that good.
Yeah, I have to.
Okay, but if we go back to the but if we go back to Dark Knight, if we go back to the Dark Knight, Chris Nolan knows how to pick the story from beginning, beginning with Batman Begins, the Dark Knight, and the Dark Knight Rises, the way he wanted to do it. Yeah, again, the guy is kind of, the guy is really much a genius on how to make us audiences, care about these characters. That's the point. I mean, Chris Nolan does how to do the characters. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's still got some flaws in it. This is one thing. This is one thing that I do want to talk about in the Dark Knight. Probably this is just a minor problem, but I do like the costume for the new suit in the Dark Knight, but I kind of love like the Batman Begins suit, to be honest. I kind of wish that they update that a bit tweaked, just make Christian Bale move his neck. That's kind of about it. But when it comes, he's kind of slimmed down, and I get the fact that Christian Bale is what kind of I don't know what type of actor who likes to lose weight and gain weight and all that. I don't know.
I'd say he's definitely I would definitely say he's a method actor for sure. So,
so he does that. So yeah, he's kind of slimmed down in the Dark Knight, and I kind of fall in love more with the Batman Begins suit. So I don't know, Ambassador George, what are your thoughts on the minor problems you have?
I like both suits, to be honest. I like the Batman Begins in the Dark Knight suit, and I like how they have like the joke where turn the head like better with the mask, because like I think that's always kind of been a complaint that Batman actors have had. Like if you remember, like Batman Returns, like when he like takes off like the mask and like how long his neck looked. Like the mask has always, I think, been like something that I think Batman actors in general have probably had problems with, just like how uncomfortable it looks. So I think like I kind of like how that kind of like little in joke that like the audience can like pick up. But I like both suits, and I feel like the suits have like inspired like the later suits in like Batman video games like Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight. Like I saw a lot of inspiration from the Dark Knight trilogy with the suits in those games.
Yes. Speaking for myself, I thought the first suit was a very good prototype. I felt, and it had its strengths, it had its advantages, but I think the Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises suits, although obviously it's the same suit, essentially. I think it was a perfection of the design and an advancement of the design. Now, granted, it does leave him vulnerable to certain forms of attack, obviously, but that forces him to be ever more on top of his game. And that is something that I really appreciate about what they did with the redesign for the suit for the Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. And I do want to bring up Daniel Martin and Neon Sci-Fi's questions here, and so we can respond to those. And Neon and Daniel and Neon, I hope you're still here, and I don't want you to think I was ignoring you. I'm just letting the guys have their time to get their points out. So would it be fair to say the Joker won in the end because he brought down the White Knight and they had to cover up Harvey's death? I would say for myself, yeah, from a certain point of view, the Joker did win. George, Ferris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that as well, because also, like, not just the fact that Harvey turned, Batman had to push Harvey off a ledge to save Gordon's son, and obviously that fall did kill him. So you can make the case that he pushed Batman to break his rule to save Gordon's son, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Ferris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think like the Joker, the Joker won. He turned Harvey into Two-Face, and yet he what else? He kidnapped hostages, and he killed like those 5 cops. I think he said, is that 5 dead? 2 of them cops. Yeah. Wait, sorry, 2 of them cops. Sorry, that I just remember that. So yeah, I guess like at the end, it really presented how Joker is insanely smart, and he outsmarted the good guys, and including Batman and Jim Gordon. That's the thing about how he won, and the uniqueness of his mind, the insane mind, the mentality he has. He totally beats the Dark Knight and the GCPD.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I do want to address Neon's question here. Which Batman story was it when Ra's al Ghul took over his daughter's body and seduced Bruce? I know that they did use that particular storyline for an animated film or something along those lines. But as far as the name of that particular storyline, Neon, I honestly don't recall, to be honest with you. George, Ferris, do you have any idea?
I think the only thing that I remember over Talia's body, and I think he's making Bruce Wayne going to the Lazarus pit and becoming young again. But I don't. That's like the one story that I remember. But I don't know a part where he seduced Bruce Wayne. But there is the one story that I remember in the comics where it was actually Talia who seduced Batman and make him make her pregnant with Batman's child, which is obviously
son of the Batman. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's the only story that I remember. I don't know about George. What do you have?
Oh, about Ra's al Ghul?
Yeah,
Neon's question. Now, if you don't know anything, that's okay. So
I can't, like, comic book wise, I can't remember. I do know the episode of Batman Beyond that you were mentioning. I do remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Ra's al Ghul, I remember, like, because I don't think I've ever seen any of the Ra's al Ghul episodes of Batman the Animated Series before Batman Begins. They always pronounce Raz's name differently. Like, we know the Dark Knight Trilogy pronounced it as Raz, and then like other versions pronounce it as Ra's al Ghul. Like, that always used to confuse me because I was like, wait, have I been pronouncing it wrong? Like, because they pronounced it as Raz in the Dark Knight Trilogy.
So, well, that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the last film of the trilogy, and that is, of course, Dark Knight Rises. So, I will say this: I know this movie causes a lot of derision and a lot of criticism and so on, but considering what they had to do with this film in light of what happened in terms of Heath Ledger's passing, there's a lot of good here. I think honestly the ending to this trilogy is just as solid as the beginning, and you've got as always some very powerful performances. You, of course, have Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. You've got Tom Hardy as Bane. I cannot remember for the life of me the name of the actress who played Talia al Ghul in The Dark Knight. It's going to drive me nuts.
Marion Cotillard, that's her name.
Okay, thank you, Ferris. Appreciate that. And of course, you've got Morgan Freeman back as Lucius Fox. You've got dang it, Gary Oldman as Jim Gordon. I have to admit, when they announced this film, I was like, how are they going to top The Dark Knight? I asked that question of myself and some friends. I was like, how are they going to top The Dark Knight? And a lot of us were like, don't know. But I have to say, they may not have topped it, but they definitely ended the story on a strong note. On a very, very strong note. I would say on a crescendo, most definitely. And I can understand where people may have criticisms, but myself, they're minor in my book. They really are. So, but fellas, your initial thoughts on The Dark Knight Rises. So the floor is yours.
I remember like going into it and not expecting it to be as phenomenal as The Dark Knight, and I love this movie. I don't care what people say. Is it the weakest of the three films? Yes, but I still love this film because I think this is a great character study of Bruce Wayne after he basically retired. He completed the mission but feels empty about it because it was based off of a lie him and Gordon agreed to make without having Rachel in his future. And you also see like how it's been eating Gordon up alive. You see how Alfred's conflicted about like keeping the truth about like Rachel choosing Harvey for him. Like you see like these men, despite the 8 years of peace, like basically being eaten up inside because of the secrets that they've had to keep. And Tom Hardy as Bane is phenomenal. I don't care what people say. That is a phenomenal villain. Mm-hmm. And Anne Hathaway as Catwoman is very underrated. And yeah, this has the least amount of Batman screen time. But again, this is, I think, more so a character study of Bruce Wayne and like how he's basically getting his quote groove back, or like in this case, trying to rebuild himself as Batman to save Gotham City one last time.
Mm-hmm. Ferris, your thoughts?
Honestly, I'm like you, Ambassador. I'm always like asking myself, like, if they're making a third movie, like, how are they gonna top like Heath Ledger's Joker? Like, are they gonna bring him back or not? Like, this is like something like probably Christopher Nolan like is having a hard time. Like for like about 3 years or 4 years if you counted. Like I'm pretty sure like he didn't want to do it because there's no Heath Ledger, and and I'm pretty sure like he had something in mind on what to do with the Joker in the third movie. But since his untimely passing, I guess like he really have to find a way to top himself, from what he did in the Dark Knight. So when I heard about the title, it's called The Dark Knight Rises. Like, okay, I initially thought it was going to be called The Dark Knight Returns, because probably like bringing old man Batman, or maybe Batman in his 50s. But no, apparently it's called Dark Knight Rises. I'm like, okay. So I'm trying to think myself, like, who's going to be the villain? Like, there were rumors back then that Johnny Depp is going to be the Riddler. That's actually perfect casting, but I don't know if the Riddler could be like, a good like antagonist, to Batman in a third movie. With of course Christian Bale, and of course in his co-stars. But okay, Bane. Okay, a good idea. At least we got something different. And I'm always wondering like how are you gonna do the voice? Is he gonna be like Hispanic, Latino kind of guy? But apparently he's not. This is a very different Bane, and I know like I love his character of Bane, but the only minor problem that I have the only problem that I have, of course, is the voice. Everyone is making fun of it because, yeah, Christopher Nolan's is obsessed with inaudible dialogue, which pisses some people off, and I know it pisses Ryan off because he even said it, to me and the rest of the rest of the guys on his stream, or on Bell or on Truth's stream. So yeah, I do love the I do love the character. I love his physical presence, and I do love the character of Catwoman. And unlike Michelle Pfeiffer, who is still to this day is the best. Anne Hathaway is basically the traditional Catwoman in the comics. A burglar, who probably like hits off on Bruce Wayne. Yeah, and I kind of think like she's actually one of the highlights of the film, but I guess she could have like saved the film also. And another thing that I kind of have a minor gripes at it is the character of Batman. And I know, like George said, it is a study of how like Bruce Wayne is kind of broken after his battle with the Joker. Okay, I guess it kind of makes sense, but again, like the thing that I do not like is that he has to use like how is that that he has to have a broken leg. He has to have a broken leg, and he has to like go with a stick or whatever to go on it and go on events. And like he has been isolated for 8 years. Like really? I mean, I know it kind of downgrade the character, but again, the Batman that I knew would not be like that. He wouldn't be like that broken. He would still like rebuild himself, like probably like training and work out like in isolation for 8 years. But then again, like it's a character study that Christopher Nolan gave the audience, and I think like the ending, I think it's a really symbolizing ending where they tell that Batman can be anybody, that it doesn't have to be Bruce Wayne, but it really tells the message that anyone can be Batman. And even even the character of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays the cop turned detective John Blake. Really, he's a really good character. And to be honest, I initially thought that he was gonna be, Nolan's version of Dick Grayson. I mean, he said it himself. He's an orphan. He saw Bruce Wayne when he was young, and like, how the hell did he find out, about Bruce Wayne as Batman? Like, what? How? Like, he's suddenly like combining like Dick Grayson and Tim Drake together. Because if you know Tim Drake from the comic, he finds out, a Batman and Robin's secret identity. So, like, I honest to God, that why not make Joseph Gordon-Levitt, like his version, like Christopher Nolan's version of Dick Grayson? It would make sense, to be honest. I mean, he took over the Batman mantle. I mean, let's not forget, by the end of the movie, he wore that blue shirt and black jacket. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's it's Nightwing costume. I honestly thought that Nolan would bring in Robin, but everyone knows that Robin is not presented in this movie, but then again, we all have to focus on Batman, as always. Yes. So when it comes to adapting, maybe like, I think if Chris Nolan adapting like the Bat Family, I think he would not be presented along with Bruce Wayne, probably their own kind of characters. And I think that's actually a really clever idea if Chris Nolan would ever adapt like the Bat Family characters of Dick Grayson, maybe Jason Todd, Tim Drake, or Barbara Gordon. I mean, which Barbara Gordon does make an appearance in Batman Begins when she's baby, and when I think she's like in her toddler, I think, in the Dark Knight, and and she was not present in the Dark Knight Rises. But again, so going back to the whole story and the whole movie overall, and I think, yeah, it's a pretty decent conclusion, to be honest. Even though like it's not really a perfect ending, but it's the way that Chris Nolan wanted to end the movie.
Yeah.
That's just me.
George, did you already give your thoughts? I can't remember.
Yeah, I kind of offer my thoughts, but I do want to say, by the way, it's kind of funny how the half the cast of The Dark Knight Rises was also half the cast of Inception.
You're not
That
wrong.
is true.
Yeah,
Like Michael Caine, like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy. I'm gonna mispronounce this name. The actress that plays Talia, Marion Cotillard.
Marion Cotillard.
Yeah, like the half and Cillian Murphy. I forget Cillian Murphy's like briefly in The Dark Knight Rises as the judge.
Yes,
so like
it's basically like Judge Crane or Judge Scarecrow. Yeah,
but yeah, like half the cast of Inception's literally in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, I remember that too. Excuse me, sorry. And I do want to address the chat. Neon Sci-Fi. First time we see Bruce in Dark Knight Rises, he was old and broken with the cane. I guess Bane could be able to break his back without venom. Here's the thing, Neon, and I think some people forget this. There are numerous ways that you can break a person's back, and you don't have to have some sort of fictionalized steroid to do it. You can have the sheer physical strength and knowledge of pressure points and everything else across the board to be able to break a person's back. And I think what Tom Hardy did as Bane, the line that he says just before he does it. Ah, yes. I wondered what would break first. Your mind or your body?
I love that fight scene because there's like no music playing during it. It's like literally like all his mercenaries know he's gonna lose. Like Batman's gonna lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that for me, all you hear is the impacts, the fists, the kicks, everything, and I really. You think the darkness is your ally? I was born in it, bred to it. I wasn't a man until I saw the light of day, and to me it was nothing but blinding.
That's actually a good nod to like his backstory from the comics. He was actually born, in prison. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, probably having the same kind of backstory from the comics too, with a different twist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll bring up Daniel Martin. He's actually got a few comments here. Funny comparison that Kevin Smith was making with The Dark Knight Rises was to Rocky 3. Bruce Wayne is in retirement. Bane is terrorizing Gotham. Alfred tries to talk Bruce out of going after Bane. Yeah, Daniel, I can get that comparison because I have seen, I think, Rocky 3 maybe once or twice in my entire life. I've just never been I don't hate the movies. I've never been a big fan of the Rocky franchise. So, and Daniel Martin here again. Bane handled Bruce easily. Bruce has to learn how to be Batman again. Yep. When he says, victory has defeated you. And he almost has that very, pitiful look for Bruce. He's like, you're no challenge to me at all. You're just going to go down like everybody else does. And you almost think he has just a slight tinge of regret what he's going to have to do to Bruce. But at the same time, he knows that what he has to do to Bruce is necessary. And Daniel Martin, I really like Nolan using real-life metaphors for the Lazarus Pit. Talia found purpose when she escaped the pit. Bruce is reborn when he's able to escape the pit. Yeah, I never really thought of it that way, Daniel, so that was a good catch there, bud. The prison, the pit. having to climb out of it. Yeah, I have to agree with you.
Yeah, that's
So-
actually some real world metaphor for for making a Lazarus pit more realistic than just, how do I say it, spiritual or magic thing. I know it's a really comic book kind of thing, but when it comes to going to an adaptation for a real world Batman, and I think, yeah, I guess that kind of fit well, kind of.
Well, there are many elements at work within this film. You've got Roland Daggett, who's trying to take over Wayne Enterprises. You've got Bruce, who has seemingly bankrupted Wayne Enterprises by building this nuclear reactor that could power the whole Blaze City, but he's too afraid to even turn it on. And you've got Lucius Fox, who's like, you want Wayne Enterprises to survive? We need to turn this thing on and get it working. Of course, you've got Bane and Talia al Ghul working side by side. You have the very gripping and very engaging opening sequence with Bane and the nuclear physicist. And of course, it's iconic. There's two iconic lines. Perhaps he wonders why you would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane. And the agent goes, "Who are you?" No one cared who I was before I put on the mask. And it's true. And it actually mirrors something that Bruce said in Batman Begins. I need to be a symbol. Bane is also a symbol. But no one cared who Bruce Wayne was until he became Batman. Because if you remember in Batman Begins, when he says, I didn't steal anything, and the police officer says, I don't care who you are, you're a thief. In the world, no one cares who you are until you show that that you have some sort of influence or power or whatever the case may be. To people on the other side of the world, Bruce Wayne is just another man. And it's true here of Bane. No one cared who Bane was until he put on that mask and became head of this radical faction of the League of Shadows. But people started to care when he started carrying out his plan for Gotham City. And I have to admit, talking about it now, it never really dawned on to me until now how much Dark Knight Rises echoes Batman Begins. Although it very deliberately echoes with some of the dialogue that Talia says that echoes what her father said in Begins. And I have to admit, that was a very good piece of storytelling and script writing in terms of the dialogue for Talia al Ghul. So, but Ferris, George, as always, your thoughts.
That opening sequence with the plane, I love it so much. Every time I watch it, like, I'm on the edge of my seat, even when I know what's gonna happen. Like, if there's one thing I will say, like, The Dark Knight Rises has over The Dark Knight, which is a perfect film, but still, one thing I think I love more about Dark Knight Rises is Bane's opening scene over the Joker's opening scene. To me, just sends more goosebumps because you really don't know what's going to happen on this plane with all these soldiers the first time you watch it. You're like wondering, like is it, like, what's going to happen on this plane, and like how's it going to get hijacked? Like, what kind of impact is Bane going to have, like, the first time you see him? And this guy means business, not just like physically, but strategically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so honestly though, the biggest highlight for The Dark Knight Rises has to be the action scenes. That opening really puts a lot of adrenaline in you. So like when it comes to like the other action scenes, like we get Batman in his bat pod and yeah, trying to get through what's it called? Like a chip or something. Yeah, and yeah, that was amazing until we get to see like his bat plane or bat wing. I think it's called the
The
bat.
bat.
I think, but
Yeah.
yeah, I rather call it the bat plane or the bat wing because it's from the comics. I mean, I still call the Batmobile, even though it's called the Tumbler, and the Bat Pod the Bat Cycle, even though it's called the Bat Pod. So yeah, I think like the act, the highlights of this movie are really the action. I mean, a lot of the story, it borrows elements from, not just Nightfall. I mean, there's No Man's Land now, where all the cops in Gotham are fighting the terrorist organization. But in the movie, it's of course is Bane's mercenaries. That was a big highlight. I think like the thing that bothers me is like, oh my god, Batman is fighting in daylight. That's unusual in movies. I know he did fight with the Justice League in daylight, but in the movies, like in his own movie, he fought in daylight. Oh my god, that's highly unusual to see Batman fighting in daylight. So yeah, if we go back to like one of the highlights of the movie, like we see like the whole Batman and Bane fight scene, like with no music at all. It's so phenomenal. It's like one of the best scenes in comic book movies. And then when we get to the other part of the action scenes is of course his final fight with Bane and Batman inside the bat plane, stopping Talia. I gotta say one thing though about the bat plane. I think like they're trying to take the tumbler's top or the Batmobile tumbler top and just create with create wings and all that. I'm not really a fan of it, and I remember Ryan, makes fun of it, and he said his bat plane looks like a lobster and a shoebox. Okay, that's very funny, Ryan. But then again, like the scenes in the movie, are the high, of course, are the highlights, and of course, Tom Hardy as Bane, was spot on. Even though I have issues with the voice and all of that, his
Yeah.
character is really menacing at times and intimidating.
Yeah, and I can understand. I was a little sketch. I was a little like, this is really what you're going for with the bat plane? I'm like, it's okay. It's not my favorite design for a vehicle ever, but in the grand scheme of the movie, it's a minor point, honestly. I mean, it doesn't take me out of the film entirely. It doesn't break the immersion for me. But yeah, they could have come up with something a little bit better, maybe something a little more elegant, in a manner of speaking. So, but one of the other things I will say about The Dark Knight Rises, and Zach kind of touched on this, I think, earlier on. Talia was was the only one to get as close as anyone to Bruce of the villains. It was almost like a progression, and it was a progression that I think worked very, very well. But I will say I do like the dynamic between Bruce and Selena Kyle, or Catwoman, and I am glad that he ends up with her at the end. And I do like how the movie ends overall, where you have the scene where Alfred's at that cafe somewhere in Europe or wherever, and he sees Bruce and Selena off in the distance, and Bruce toasts him, and Alfred just gives him a nod. And I think one of the best scenes in the entire film, and he's like, you didn't have to come back. You could have done any number of things to help Gotham, but you didn't have to come back as the Batman. You could have used your mind. You could have used Wayne Enterprises. You could have gone in any other direction. He's like, I just wanted you to be safe. He's like, I would have been happy if you had never come back at all. And Gotham had just gone on the way it did, or wherever the case may be. And he's like, if I had looked up at some little cafe somewhere and seen you, and you were with a woman, or you were just by yourself and you were okay. And that's the scene where Bruce pushes Alfred away and says, I don't need you anymore. That scene is gut-wrenching on so many levels, and I think by far it's one of the best scenes in the entire film, and perhaps maybe even in the entire trilogy, because Alfred says it. You didn't need to be Batman. You chose to be, and I supported you, but I can't support you anymore because of your condition, and I was seeing what being the Batman has done to you. He's like, I made a promise to your parents, to two good friends, that I would keep you safe. And I think Zach mentioned it earlier before he had to leave. In the scene where Alfred thinks that Bruce is dead, and he's standing over the grave of Bruce's grave and Thomas and Martha's, and he says, I failed you. And he's not talking to Bruce. He's talking to Bruce's parents. And I think the journey that Bruce goes on throughout this movie, from him trying to come back as the Batman, realizing that he doesn't really have it in himself anymore to be the Batman, and he passes it on to someone else, to John Blake, the detective played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And I will say this of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's portrayal and Gary Oldman's portrayal in this film. They are standouts. They did very good jobs. And I love the resolution for both their arcs. And I'll bring up Daniel's comment here. I really didn't know what to think when they cast Anne Hathaway as Selena Kyle, but I thought it really worked. Yeah, Daniel, I have to honestly agree. I think what they did with Anne Hathaway as Selena Kyle in this film, she was complex, she was deep, and she wasn't your atypical Catwoman by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I'm going to let you guys have the final thoughts and final remarks and everything, because we're going to wrap up here, because we're coming up on 3.5 hours, and I think we've given all three of these movies a good run through. But I want you guys to have the last word, and then we'll close out. So, George, Ferris, whichever one you want us to go first, the floor is yours.
I do want to say, in defense of like Alfred leaving at the end of Dark Knight Rises, he basically spent the last 8 years watching Bruce waste away his life. So like, there's always like a breaking point with the people that you love, and I think like him coming back was just the breaking point. But as far as these three films go, this is a remarkable trilogy. This is my favorite superhero franchise of all time, or comic book franchise of all time. You have the amazing best origin story, the fantastic perfect sequel, and then you have the not as good as the first two, but still great conclusions. So I love these films. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. These films made me a Nolan fan because I love Inception and his other films as well. So I'm glad we have these movies.
Likewise. Ferris?
Okay. This is a franchise that you always like to go and revisit and, see how Christopher Nolan brings Batman into a real world. Well, it's not a perfect trilogy. There are minor problems. Like there are times where Chris Nolan once he said he wants to make these characters real as possible, but sometimes you have to know exactly what these characters are saying, even though they're in different voices. I know everybody makes fun of Christian Bale's bad voice, even though I kind of understand. And Tom Hardy's Bane's voice, of course. Even people who are trying to understand like what Michael Caine is trying to say as Alfred, even though he's always playing the same kind of character in every film. But again, overall, the whole story it does have a really good beginning with the origin of with Batman Begins that loosely adapts from Year One or any other Batman stories. A really good middle, or should I say the sequel for The Dark Knight, which had a phenomenal acting from Heath Ledger. Oh, rest in peace. And who also deserved an Oscar, and also a really phenomenal movie. And of course, the third movie, like most third movie, can be good, can be bad, and I mean it's not not every third movie is a really good third movie. I mean, it's always considered a third movie, but it does have a conclusion in there. Even though I do have some problems when when the writers like downgrade Bruce Wayne's character. And also like his return as Batman. But we do still got some really good supporting cast like Anne Hathaway as Catwoman and Tom Hardy's a really good Bane. We also we still of course got good characters like Joseph Gordon-Levitt as John Blake, who I always keep thinking that he's Dick Grayson, but in my head canon, will always think that he is Nolan's interpretation of Dick Grayson, because he at the ending he's indeed becoming the next Batman, or maybe Nightwing. I don't know. It depends on which head canon. But at the end, the Dark Knight Rises does have a pretty decent conclusion to the trilogy. And you know what, one day I just hope that maybe there would be like a comic book series with a comic book series that would continue like Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, like maybe call it like the Dark Knight Legacy or something in comic book form. Get David Goyer to write, because he wrote the story for the Dark Knight trilogy, and so I really want to see like if there is a continuation of the Dark Knight trilogy in comic book form. I'm down for it, to be honest. And like Tim Burton, Tim Burton's Batman is continuing with the Batman '89 comic, and I hope you guys would do reviews of that if you're ever gonna do a live stream. So, but by the end, it's not really a perfect trilogy, but it's indeed a fun a fun ride to see Batman's journey in Christopher Nolan's headcanon.
Right. Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ferris, and you as well, George. I mean, I recognize that there are a few issues with The Dark Knight Rises. Of course I do. Because as I think we all would agree, there is no such thing as a perfect movie, although with The Dark Knight we got pretty darn close. But to give my final thoughts before we do wrap up for the evening, I love these films because not just because I'm a comic book fan, because well obviously I am, but because the characters to me are intriguing. The world that is built, it feels real. Obviously, it's sunk in reality. But most importantly, it really gives us the opportunity to ask the question, what would I do not only to honor the memory of for a parent or parents who were taken tragically. What would I do if I was seeing corruption and injustice swelling up around me? How far would I go to combat that injustice and that corruption? Not to mention, it has a lot of great moral and ethical discussions throughout all three films. And we will be revisiting these movies for years, if not decades. And I'm good with that because I think these movies are worth that type of discussion and that type of time. So, but with all that being said, folks, I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight, and for everyone that was here, I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you enjoyed the stream. George, Ferris, and of course, Zach. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves as well, and thank you for a great discussion. Thank you for joining me this evening. As always, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you leave your comments down below with anything me and the panel discussed this evening. And if you come across this stream and you enjoyed it, and you are not a member of the Ambassadorial Wing, consider hitting that subscribe button, or do hit that subscribe button and become a part of this community. I do want to let you all know there will not be an Ambassadorial Editorial next Sunday. I do have to work, and I just need a Sunday night off. I've been doing this for a few weeks now, and I do enjoy it. Do not misunderstand me. But I just need a week off. But I will be back next week, next Friday, with the Council of Ones as we continue our review of Babylon 5 Season 4. And I will be back with another Saturday Night Geekasm review. I haven't picked a topic as of yet, but I will keep you all updated on social media once I figure that out. So, and of course, make sure you go check out George and Ferris's and Zach's channels. I will include the links in the description down below once we wrap up tonight. And go show these guys some support. They are worth your time, and they are always great panelists and very good friends. So, but that being said, folks, you have a great night. Hope you have a great week, and we will see you next time. And until next time, these are the Ambassadors, signing off.